And we are all set for the next chapter in today's 12-hour marathon. This day is all about China's digital transformation. And we spoke earlier this morning about China's digital lifestyle, technology and innovation. Then we moved on into Chinese consumers deep dive. And just now we have completed the third session for today, which is China's digital marketing. This fourth session, the one we're entering in right now, is going to be 3 hours long, and it is about China's new retail and e-commerce. And George and myself are going to be moderating this session for us. As you can see, we have a phenomenal panel here. These are the new speakers. I do encourage you to follow them all with a bell. If you don't follow them with a bell, you're not going to get notifications when they are speaking next. After this session, we also have a short session about luxury and experiences today. 12 hours event from 10 a.m. in China to 9 a.m. in China to 9 p.m. in China. And with this, I'm going to hand it over to George to run you through the session. The next session, e-commerce and new retail, 3 hours starting right now. George, off to you.
Thank you so much, Ashley, and welcome everybody to this session on China e-commerce and new retail. And what we're going to do is talk specifically about how international brands can use e-commerce and new retail to sell to Chinese consumers online. I believe this is especially relevant this year, when last year so many economies were hit by COVID and had negative growth. So many brands and merchants are potentially struggling in their home country, while China continues to grow at over 2% year-on-year GDP. So this is really about how can Western international brands benefit from this huge market opportunity through the various channels available. And we have a really, really awesome panel with a mix of extremely high-level and experienced representatives from Alibaba, for example, from very large and famous brands like L'Oreal, from medium-sized brands down to boutique and family-owned brands that can do experience sharing and best practices. We have representatives from service and technology companies that do nothing but work with brands daily on helping them to market and sell to Chinese consumers, as well as also a service provider who can help on the legal and taxation side of things. So 3 hours, is barely enough to cover this amazing and huge market, but let's do our best. Before we get started, very briefly, Ashley, do you want to quickly inform people about how we manage audience participation after each session?
Absolutely. So in terms of right now, we are going to switch off, in fact, hand-raising function. So we are going to go into discussion and you guys are going to listen to the sound bites from the speakers on the panel. George is going to be addressing questions and this is going to be essentially closed discussion. Then we're going to open question raising and hand raising functionality, and you will be able to raise your hand. When you do that, make sure you go to your profile, okay? And you can edit your profile as you're listening to us. To do that, just click onto your profile and click the bio. So in your bio, the first sentence that we want you to write is, if you have a question, write question, and then tell us what is your question about. What is your question about? The second one, if you want to contribute, then you write contribution, and then you tell us just in a few words what you want to contribute on. When you have a question, raise your hand, and we will be able to quickly scan through your bios to see who has a more relevant question. We just want to make sure that we get a lot of interesting angles and a lot of interesting people on stage with us. So I hope this is clear. When we open the hand-raising function, looking forward to your essentially questions pouring in, and you can manage and make sure that you get on stage, get higher chances of success to get on stage by completing your bio with a question or contribution tags.
Thanks, Ashley. So in terms of the exact agenda, what we have planned out for today, everybody, is first we're going to start off with a fireside chat with Brian Wong, who has been with Alibaba on and off since 1999. And this will be a 40-minute session, half Q&A with myself and Ashley and the panelists, and then we're going to open it up for 20 minutes for the audience to ask Brian about the history and current state of Alibaba. We're then going to do another 40 minutes on China domestic e-commerce and new retail. This will be particularly interesting for larger brands, larger retailers, maybe medium-sized brands that are already on the ground and want to tap into both online and offline sales. And we're going to have many representatives, like I mentioned to you before, who introduce then to comment and hopefully give you the best takeaways and best practices. Again, 20 minutes panel discussion and then 20 minutes audience questions and participation. After that, we're going to talk about China cross-border e-commerce. This will be more interesting for medium-sized and smaller brands that are currently not yet on the ground, potentially in China, and want to start selling over the cross-border marketplaces. And then we'll have 1 hour left for Q&A, questions, contributions from audience members, and anything in regards to China new retail and e-commerce on a much broader level. So I hope that's useful for everybody. What we all want is for everyone to get the most out of these sessions, really have brands, marketplaces, service companies, everybody contribute and give away what they can for us all to benefit from it. All right. With all of that being said, let's go into our first guest with Brian Wong. And Brian, it's an honor to have you, and we're very, very thankful for you making yourself available on a Saturday. And very briefly, like I said in the introduction, you have been, from what I know, the first American to join Alibaba in the early days, and then probably one of the very first foreigners, together with maybe Porter Erisman, who came a bit later. And what we would love to do is to use the opportunity and speak with you to understand both the tremendous rise of Alibaba by going through the history that you experienced, and then also understand where we are today in terms of both the China setup, but also the global initiatives that you're involved with. So welcome very much.
So
how did you end up,
Yeah.
Brian, how did you end up with Alibaba in 1999? How did that happen?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, George, for having me, and thank you, Ashley and Peggy. And what an amazing day, a true marathon on Clubhouse. So I'm honored to be included and have this opportunity to speak to you. I ended up at Alibaba sort of on a sort of serendipitously. I really didn't have a plan to do a career in tech, and my interests really were in kind of development work. And I grew up in Palo Alto, California, and I had spent some time in China doing graduate school. I kind of jumped around in different jobs in consulting and in government, and I was in search of something that would really allow me to work in an area that would have the greatest impact on the largest number of people in a positive way. And so I tried these different things. I also considered a career in medicine. But after kind of dabbling here and there, I was very fortunate to meet Jack and Joe during their time in Silicon Valley. They were trying to raise funds, I think, in the Valley in 1999. I was working for the city government, actually, in San Francisco at the time. And I had been introduced to Joe probably about a year and a half before that. And when I looked around and saw what was happening in the Valley, I said, well, this technology thing is real. You know, I sort of grew up with the technology kind of world, friends tinkering in their garages, we built robots, learned a little bit about programming. But I said, this is really happening in a big way in business and also just impacting kind of daily life. So what if we mix the emerging market in China with technology and give it some teeth, by playing in the commerce area? A lot of the tech companies at the time were still focused, or internet companies were still focused on the portal business, like, Yahoo and Google was just being created. But it was really about this kind of portal sort of model, and, Sina was just in existence. So I thought it would be great to get involved in China using tech, but also focusing on trade. So that's how I got involved. I moved from San Francisco to Hangzhou in 1999.
And we should mention that at that time, Alibaba was basically a B2B marketplace, right? That was targeted at Chinese manufacturers, potentially wholesalers, to sell in the China market and overseas.
That's right. It was only a B2B market at the time, and small businesses were the focus. That's correct.
Did you live through that time and observe the switch or the extension also into the consumer-to-consumer business, which we nowadays know as Taobao? How did that happen? How did that come about from the pure B2B perspective to the actual C2C and then later on B2C stage?
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting about the evolution of the internet or digital economy in China is it was heavily influenced not just by kind of the technology of the day, but also a lot of the external factors. So when Alibaba was first started, it was really a time when China was rising as a the world's sort of global factory. It's a manufacturing hub of the world, and with over 1 billion people in the population, it provided a cheap source of labor to make things at a low price. By 2001, China had entered the WTO, and there was a huge opening up of the international markets for these manufacturers to sell to the world. So that was really how Alibaba, in its first evolution, became quite successful. It really rode this wave of international trade, particularly exports from China to the world. But as time passed, there was also another phenomenon when the government began to look at how to drive domestic consumption. As the country became more wealthy, as there was higher disposable income, there was a desire to actually, find products in China that were from abroad, but also, consumers were looking for more choice in terms of things to buy and how to access them. And so Taobao really was a response to that in terms of trying to really provide, in lieu of the lack of shopping malls and kind of retail infrastructure, Taobao provided a consumer-to-consumer and then later a business-to-consumer opportunity for merchants and brands to promote their products directly to consumers. And then the consumers obviously were seeking these products and were very open to new channels to find that, because the traditional system did not exist. So that was another trend, domestic consumption, which helped, really drive this business. And you can use kind of the same logic or observation so in many of the other businesses that emerged from Alibaba. They were either external factors that were driving it, or just a societal need where there was a lack of these services, like the financial services and lack of credit cards. I mean, credit card penetration was single digits when Alipay was created, but there was a need to do transactions, particularly online with the rise of e-commerce, that need filled, which then evolved into financial services because you had all these consumers who had, they were starting to do, these activities online through their digital wallets.
Awesome. Since most of the session we're going to talk about merchants and brands, but while we have you, I remember in the early days, the first war was kind of against eBay, that at that time was the dominant force in the Western world. And, many books have been written and many business cases have been made about how foreign technologies in the end really failed to penetrate the market. Could you quickly talk us through that? What were the success factors that Alibaba had or that Taobao had that eBay at that time didn't have, or vice versa? What did eBay do wrong that they ended up eventually exiting the market?
Yeah, good question. I think there were a few factors that influenced that battle between Taobao and eBay. One of the first was really this concept of how one saw the market. The addressable market to many at that time was simply those who were online, and eBay captured or those who were I guess online and purchasing or active on e-commerce. And eBay essentially had about 95% of the market at that time. But what the Taobao team believed is the market you should look at is much bigger than that. It's not only who's already buying online, but it's also who's online, who has an internet connection that maybe hasn't used e-commerce yet. But even beyond that, it's really the larger consumer base who hasn't even discovered the internet. And the reason why they felt so confident about that addressable market is because they had actually built a market on the B2B side based on a market that hadn't existed, but really targeting small, medium-sized enterprises. And most people believe that there wasn't a sizable market for the B2B space prior to the creation of Alibaba.com. In fact, there were only 8.8 million internet users in all of China in 1999.
Wow.
Yeah, and so most people didn't think it was a viable market. The per capita income in 1999 was $800. And so most people didn't think there was even a market that had enough money to spend on e-commerce. So you can see where the starting points were from each of the organizations. Now, the other factors for eBay, Taobao battle that influenced things was really, the business model. So eBay was really taking a model from Silicon Valley and moving it to the China market, and that was, relying on existing payment systems like credit cards and PayPal, but also the way that the customers interacted. They didn't allow consumers to interact with the merchants. They didn't allow them to talk to them directly. There was no sort of chat function, and this is something that Taobao created because many of the consumers wanted to bargain, they wanted to get more information, and it was a real-time chat function that existed. The UI itself was also much more sort of China-friendly, very busy, very a lot of stuff, which to most Westerners would look messy and unruly, but to the Chinese, it was exciting and it provided more stimulation in terms of making decisions to buy. eBay was much more kind of streamlined. And finally, there was this whole phenomenon of communities where users would do product reviews, product critiques, and just comment on all the new things that were hitting the market on the Taobao platform. And I don't think that EachNet or eBay in China at the time had anything as robust. And finally, it was just the model of a transaction fee that eBay charged for every transaction. Taobao didn't charge. And I remember the quote from eBay's spokesperson said, free is not a business model. And we sort of laughed because, yes, free is not a business model if you're only looking at that period in time. But what we've seen is that Taobao transactions are free, but advertising is where they make all the money. And that is a very, very profitable business. So those are the different factors that influence the battle between eBay and Taobao at the time.
Well, the interesting thing about that is that all of these key innovations are still relevant today. So on the one side, and this is for the international audience, right? What sets Tmall apart from, let's say, Amazon is that what happens in China is you have almost 0% payment fraud or credit risk, because what Alibaba does, it holds the payment of the consumer in escrow until he or she receives the product before they release it to the merchant. So that continues to be, also the key driver in terms of reliance and safety and security today.
Yes.
And the second one being what you said with chatting. And again, if for those in the audience that are not as familiar, you have to imagine that if you have a Tmall shop, around 40% of your sales to maybe 50% is what we call so-called assisted sales, meaning that they go through a prior interaction with a customer service representative. Or in fact, it's actually salespeople that are experts on the product and that sit there 24 hours per day to consult consumers on the application of the product, on the heritage, and with that increase conversion rate and give confidence to consumers. So both of these are more than ever still prevalent in the market today.
Yeah, very good point.
With that, Brian, let's briefly continue in the history. Once eBay realized they couldn't compete in the C2C market, rather soon Alibaba then started to officialize the opportunities for brands to sell to consumers. And again, for those who do not know, the name Tmall actually comes from the word Taobao Mall. So originally, I remember still when it was mall, I think .taobao.com. And remind us, Brian, was one of the biggest, one of the first biggest brands, was that Uniqlo from Japan that kind of made an alliance, or how did that start to really officialize this channel for brands?
Yeah, no, good question. I want to go back to what I said previously in terms of how external factors have affected our evolution. The one I forgot to mention was SARS. That was also a big factor. In 2003, we ended up having to quarantine our entire company because there was an alleged case from the Canton trade show that one of our staff we thought had contracted and came back to Hangzhou. And that really created a huge impact on kind of how we looked at our business, but also the country as a whole also realized, oh my gosh, we may or may not be able to go to these trade shows, and we will need to rely more on online as a way to reach our customers. That was one of the big factors that influenced people's thinking and also appreciation for online back in the B2B days. Now, in 2008, if people remember, there was something called the financial crisis, particularly in the United States, that really hit home and caused a lot of panic within the business community. Well, that was also a catalyst when you ask about the emergence of Tmall. One of the things that happened in that time was that a lot of the international businesses that were buying from China stopped buying at that time because of the financial difficulty. So the manufacturers in China actually realized that they were going to have problems exporting what was at that time a lot of OEM products, sort of branded products that they were manufacturing on behalf of international brands. So what happened at that time, George, was they actually started to think about, how do I create my own domestic brands to sell to the Chinese consumers, because China was relatively unscathed during the financial crisis. So that was when Chinese brands started to develop their own brands, things like Taoping Pai, which was the Taobao brand. And we happened to have Taobao Mall already kind of set up, but it wasn't getting much traction. And when these Chinese brands started to jump onto this Taobao Mall platform, then consumers started to pay more attention to this. And as the 2008 financial crisis started to kind of lighten up and the international brands started to come back into play, then you had more international brands recognizing, wow, there's this legitimate channel called Taobao Mall, which was eventually changed to Tmall, and we can sell directly to consumers, because by the time that they came back, there were a lot of credible consumers that wanted to buy branded products that were being sold through this Tmall channel. And Uniqlo was definitely one of the big ones, because it was one of those kind of how should I say, blue chip type brands that jumped onto the platform and really attracted people. But I remember one of the very first brands that we were experimenting with when it was still Taobao Mall was Gillette. Was P&G, and particularly Gillette. I remember their innovation group said, let's experiment with Gillette razors and see if people will buy those on the Taobao Mall. So there were a lot of major brands like P&G and Uniqlo that were curious early on, but it really started to pick up momentum, once they did these formal campaigns. So it's an interesting phenomenon, but it takes time, right? I mean, a lot of people say, well, why didn't you just go straight into that model? There's a lot of reasons why one needed to kind of build up the consumer base, build the confidence, build the know-how before the big brands could be successful on something like Tmall.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue to the last question, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A with the audience. Can you take us to how we moved from that stage into where we are now with new retail and all the adjacent industries that Alibaba is active in, and also what you personally do these days in terms of the global entrepreneurship and global initiatives by Alibaba?
Sure. So, we always said, this is from the first few years, the Alibaba model would be to meet at Alibaba, work at Alibaba, and then live at Alibaba. What's amazing is that Jack, our founder, really had this vision for what Alibaba could become. And so the meet at Alibaba was really this matchmaking kind of business, which was started with B2B and then Taobao. And then working at Alibaba was really how Taobao then moved into, providing opportunities and jobs to people and as a payment platform through Alipay. And now live at Alibaba is Alibaba should become this way of life or a part of everyone's life. And, I think there was a belief that the online or e-commerce was the first step, but we never, or Alibaba, never believed that that's where it ended. And the reason why that, offline now has become such an important part is because e-commerce only constitutes about 29% of total retail in China today. And, if you really want to tap into the larger consumer market, you have to find other channels beyond just online. And when you think about the impact of data and how that affects our lives today, it will become more and more integrated. Essentially, the digital economy is the digitization of our lives. And what that means is you can use the data, your behavior and your purchasing and decisions, are put into kind of a data sort of format. But then using that data, you can improve the efficiency of your life by making decisions more quickly, by using platforms that provide you the things you want in real time, and having multiple ways to access that. So whether it's a fresh hippo, this Hema invention, whether it's the Yintai shopping mall innovations, whether it's the mom and pop Olama sort of delivery services, all of those things, and even, frankly, the government services today that are becoming very prevalent. And for those who have lived in China for a while, really appreciate the time saving that you can pay your utilities through your mobile phone or any of the government services. These things are all making life better for people and more efficient. And so if you think about what Hema, the fresh hippo concept, does, it actually increases the utilization rate of the space in a supermarket by 5 times. And that is done because of the technology today. And so from a brand perspective, if you think about how it can help you, it'll give you much greater insights into your consumers, allow you to segment them with more preciseness, and also know how to, frankly, create products that will be relevant to your consumer base. And some people have heard about the Alibaba operating system. Some people have heard about the plans, this latest Spring Thunder after COVID, where the company is trying to digitize businesses and use data to help manufacturers be smarter about their products and the product planning and design. And then also on the retail and F&B side, what has been done with Starbucks or KFC examples, completely changing the consumer experience. Those are truly innovative and related to the Alibaba sort of vision.
Absolutely. And Brian, I hope your time allows it to still stick with us for the next few minutes or even hours when we would talk about the opportunities for brands and how they can use everything you mentioned for the Chinese market. In closing, very briefly, because I don't want to diminish the current role that you hold at Alibaba with being an advisor to the global initiatives, can you shortly talk about what you believe, what of all these learnings and this over 20 years of experience can be exported to the rest of the world, what has to be adapted, or why some of those things might not even be able to be brought into other geographies?
Yeah, thanks, George. Well, first of all, I'd say that my last few years at Alibaba were focused on passing the baton, so to speak, to the next generation, and very happy we have two superstars who were part of our Alibaba Global Leadership Academy. Chloe and Sharon are the next generation who will be able to answer a lot of specific questions around Tmall Global, and really highlight some of the powerful tools that we have today. I also spent time, in addition to the Alibaba Global Leadership Academy, designing Alibaba Global Initiatives, which was part of the Alibaba Business School. And we're essentially trying to take the lessons from the last 20 years and codify them into a curriculum that we then teach to entrepreneurs, not only in China, but also in Southeast Asia and all the way to Africa. And the thrust of that curriculum is really to share our lessons learned in China and really show that you can build something out of nothing, and that something that you build can have a major impact on society. And I think that for entrepreneurs, one of the greatest lessons that can be learned from the Alibaba experience is really what was the mentality and what was the mission and the vision behind this, and how did the organization evolve over time. Anyone that tells you that Ali had a master plan to end up where it is today back 20 years ago would be lying to you. But what we did have was a belief in the role of technology and a belief that that the team could do its part to at least try and move that dream forward and contribute to that creation of the ecosystem. And I think one more lesson, George, from all this is recognizing that each market has its unique challenges. But if you use a customer-centric approach and build a business off of the needs in society, the problems that exist in those societies, then you're more likely to have success in a business that you build because it's being built with the purpose of solving society's problems.
Well said. And Brian, there couldn't have been a better introduction to China e-commerce than having you join us today and walk us through this development of Alibaba that is synonymous with the success of e-commerce. We want to open up the stage now for questions to Brian. If any of the panelists want to engage with Brian, please do so. Before that, Ashley is going to quickly announce to the audience how we're going to get you guys involved. So please take over. And in the meantime, the panelists can also think if they would like to ask any question to Brian.
Absolutely.
Yes,
thank you, George. Yes, absolutely. So, guys, if you are interested in asking a question, as mentioned before, please make sure that you go to your bio. And in your bio, you write a question if you have a question, and give us just a few words to describe what you want to ask. And if you want to contribute, then you write the word contribute. That needs to be the first sentence in your bio. You can do it without leaving the room, just by clicking your avatar at the top right corner and editing your bio. After you have edited your bio, raise your hand, and we are going to quickly scan through your questions, and we're going to bring you on stage.
And please save the hard questions for Chloe and Sharon.
Brian, hey, this is Peggy. I just wanted to thank you again for contributing to this session, also other sessions. Sorry you missed brunch, but yeah. I signed you up. You'll be very happy to know I signed you up for a room on the future of education in China.
Okay, great. Hope I can find something to talk about on that one. But yeah, great.
Oh, I'm sure. So, I'm back. Thank you so much, everybody, to basically be present with us in the We the Future Club. Please feel free to join the club, as well as follow all the speakers that you're interested in. And if you follow with the bell, for those of you who are new to Clubhouse, you will be notified when they speak in future rooms. And if you'd like to see a calendar of other rooms where we're talking about mainland China like this, whether it's on sustainability or luxury or education or health or China Africa, China Brazil, China UAE, etc., these are all rooms that we are currently working together, about 700 of us now in the background on Wechat, coordinating to create rooms just like this. And we welcome all of you who have experience in the mainland, living or working in China or working with China, to share your stories, because there's nothing like building a bridge and building one world than really humanizing China and helping the West really understand what's happening, the scale of what's happening and the innovation that's happening in China and what that means for the rest of the world. So I encourage you to follow all of us. If you WeChat me, unfortunately you can't scan a QR code anymore because we are past 200 people in our WeChat. But if you add me on WeChat at Shanghai Peggy, one word, I will make sure that you are added to the attendee WeChat group for this. And there we are sharing the calendar links for China topic rooms, as well as a form for how you can sign up to share your stories on Clubhouse as well. So thank you very, very much for being in this room today. And Ashley, thank you so much for being the light rod that created today's room.
Thank you so much, Peggy, building on the amazing community that you have put together.
It's a we.
Yes, absolutely. All credit to Peggy.
But
Peggy for president.
President of the WeChat group. For those of you who are new to Clubhouse, I'm just looking, it's actually half of you who are new to Clubhouse. So it is really, it works to your advantage to follow people, because it changes the AI, what the AI brings up in your hallway, and suggests to you for people to follow. So for people who are just contributing amazing stories that you can't even pay for, like Brian's, and he hasn't written a book yet, Brian, but I'll keep prodding you.
Working on it. Okay.
Yes. So you can't get access to these stories. And so that's the amazing thing about Clubhouse. It's a safe space to really share a level of depth that you don't normally get about China. So I really encourage you to work together on Clubhouse versus just think about how you can get more followers alone, or really everything is exponential if you work together on Clubhouse. So with that, back to you, Ashley. All yours.
George, go for it. I think we brought a couple of people on stage,
let's hand
right?
it over to the audience. That's right. There's several people from the audience with questions. Mylene, hej, hur är läget? Välkomna.
Tack, det är bra.
I saw you had a questions about logistics, and you're here from Sweden. Mår du bra?
Yes, I am. Tack så mycket. Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor, not only a pleasure. I'm Milene Fernström, living in Sweden, home of Volvo cars, working with excellence and with e-commerce. And my question to Brian, I can't believe it, I can do a question to Brian.
Oh, come on.
And this is the question. Logistics.
Okay.
If you want to succeed with e-commerce, so you have to have a very good model on logistics. How is this logistics model in Alibaba and other Chinese e-commerce winners to succeed and, to send products in a big country as China, and not only sending them, but also doing the returns? So how does it look, this logistics model? I cannot find information anywhere, but I hope you have the answer.
Well, okay. So, Mylene, thank you for the question. I will start by saying I'm not the expert in this area, but I can tell you that it's probably one of the biggest challenges for most, and in e-commerce, because it's the area that has quite a bit of complexity. The good thing, though, is that Alibaba, based on its mission of making it easy to do business anywhere, has tried to solve that by creating a company that is essentially a data platform for logistics coordination. That company is called Cainiao, which is spelled Cainiao. Maybe Sharon and Chloe later on in the call can address the specifics of this, but anyone who sets up a store on the Alibaba ecosystem generally will have access to the Cainiao network, which is a network of over 200 logistics players in the China market that serve China, but also serve probably close to 90, if not more, countries in the world through a integrated system, data system. And the idea behind this is that, understanding that this is one of the big bottlenecks in e-commerce, the company in 2013, Alibaba, created Cainiao Logistics. And off the back of that, whether you're a freight forwarder, a shipper, an air freight carrier, you can plug into the system and find clients who are looking for services to move and ship products. And those clients can also find you as a logistics carrier. And that makes it much easier to actually piece together the supply chain. Not only that, there are ratings on these logistics partners so that people can decide, do they want speed over cost? Do they want quality over cost? Do they, what are the factors that are most important to them? Maybe they want lower cost and slower, shipment times. But those all can be determined through this Cainiao system. And that, at least for China, in and out of China, but even within China, is the probably a very good solution for anyone with logistics needs.
Mylene, I hope that was useful, and I hope you can join us for the next 2 hours, and we'll cover many of these topics in more detail. And with that, let's hand over to Nick. Did you have a question for Brian specifically? And please go ahead, the stage is yours. Nick, are you there?
Hi, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm dialing in from a very busy Chinese New Year period here in China. I hope you can hear me well. My question to Brian is, thank you very much for introducing a very broad ecosystem that indeed encompasses e-commerce and beyond. My question is, is a question regarding the talent side, and basically how companies can, find and onboard the right talents to help them potentially, mostly companies, for example, companies based overseas, to understand how to navigate the e-commerce landscape in China, to find the right partner, Tmall partner in China. And so in your experience, for those companies that aren't as necessarily fortunate, let's say, to find talents like Chloe, yourself, and Sharon, what are their options to sort of, to make that first step?
Well, you preempted me. I was going to say exactly that. You've got to get the good ones like Chloe and Sharon, but obviously in limited supply. Look, your next best is to work with people like George. Web to Asia has been around a long time as what they call a TP. And when you're selecting a TP or a Taobao partner, it's really critical that you look at the not only how nice the PowerPoint presentation is or the website, but how much local knowledge they actually have in terms of their staff, how deep they actually get into the operational side of things. Because I've seen a lot of TPs that do a really good sales pitch, but behind that, there isn't a lot of knowledge and depth. Like, how many ex-staff do they have from an Alibaba, a Taobao, a Tmall, Cainiao, or a JD for that matter, if you're doing other platforms? That's really important. Or how long have they been in the industry? I ran a TP for a short time when I took a break from Alibaba, and I just realized how much work it is to run these types of operations. But if you're an international brand trying to enter the China market, you really need to know, it's all about hand-to-hand combat, and you need to know all the tricks and all the the tools at your disposal to compete. Someone said earlier this morning, China is the most competitive market in the world when it comes to things like e-commerce and technology. And as a result, that is what allows it to accelerate and evolve so quickly. But you also have to be ready for that. And so the talent, I would say, is really finding people who are localized enough to be able to do that hand-to-hand combat. Because the corporate, sort of talk and presentations works when you're dealing with the big brands. But then when you want to get the results, you've got to have the real local expertise.
Thank you very much, Brian, for the shout out. And also, in the spirit of these talks that we're hosting, and in all fairness, also Josh here in the panel runs a TP company, and he'll contribute later on. So please stay put for a much more in-depth session coming up where we talk about how exactly brands can succeed in this market. Let's hand over to Peter. Did you have a question for Brian? Please go ahead.
I do. Hey, Brian. Good to see you here, even though I've known you.
Hey, Peter. You're up late, man.
I am up late. But I looked at my phone and there you were, and here I am. So I learned a lot about your transition to Ali. I never heard those stories, but I'm curious about, I don't know if you would call this your current chapter, but what was it that led you to being a tech executive to go and found this radii thing? Give us the founder's journey. What the things that you're doing at Alibaba that led you to want to go out and create your own venture as you were doing all the other things. Like what was the inception like?
And by the way, Peter, I just wanted to say hi too. So.
Hey, Peggy.
You guys are doing well over there.
Yeah.
Hello from LA.
No, it's like one big family here.
Yes, we are.
No, thanks, Peter. So look, just for those who don't know, I transitioned out of my full-time role at Alibaba 6 months ago to really commit to this venture called Radii. The URL is on my bio. But radii is, obviously the word is plural for radius. And what I'm trying to really focus on is the intersection of the East and West and where they come together as a topic for this new media platform, and particularly focused on youth. The reason being, Peter, I think that e-commerce is going to do just fine if I kind of transition out of that, and we've got it in good hands with all the people that I've mentioned. But what the world needs to better understand is China today. And, whether it's doing business or everyday life or particularly politics, people need to understand what's happening in China in terms of the evolution of the culture here. And young people are driving that culture. And so what Radii focuses on is the changes taking place in China, particularly amongst a culture like film, music, design, even obviously consumption, and wellness and technology. All these areas are shaping society. And as businesses or business owners or brand owners, it's probably important for people to understand these changes as they think about how to position their products. But, more importantly is, understanding the culture so that we can all, frankly, get along. And so this is important to me, and that's why I decided to pursue that. Hope that answers the question. And, people, for those who don't know Peter, he's doing something very equally interesting around, creating a whole storyverse around a chronicle of wuxia kung fu novels, which was great inspiration to Jack, actually, wuxia kung fu novel genre. So great to hear from you, Peter.
I have a follow-up question. to you, Brian. What has been the hardest thing to get people to care about Chinese culture when you step out of politics in business and you go into more lifestyle things? Is where, in my experience, a lot of things kind of flatline.
Yeah, look, I think the hardest part is getting people to see how that relates to their life or to their world, because sometimes things, especially coming from the East, appear so foreign to them in the context of their world. And so I think that, trying to put it or present it in a way that is meaningful and matters to the audiences in the West is the hardest part. And again, this is where, in some ways, business is a great unifier, because what it does is causes people to care because they're trying to build a business around it. But hopefully, beyond just the practical making a dollar, there is this understanding of the culture and appreciation for the culture, which I think many people doing business here in China gain over time.
Thank you so much, Brian, and for your question, Peter. Happy to reconnect old friends here. Theo, you're up next, and you're going to be our last audience member for this section to ask a question to Brian. I saw that you're helping build brands in Africa, which is a very interesting topic for all of us. Peggy is hosting rooms particularly on this topic, so please go ahead, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, guys. Really am absolutely honored that you brought me up on stage. And to Brian, I'm just incredibly inspired by your story. I've really followed Jack Ma and sort of seen what he's done with Alibaba. It's been an incredible inspiration. And to sort of hear it from you, really want to thank you for that. Similar to sort of yourself, we entered the African market. I came back to Nigeria in 2008. And, as you were sort of mentioning what the environment like, I actually remember we basically came in and there were 800,000 people online in Nigeria, just 800,000. And I had to pitch my whole entire company, right, on digital marketing. And just, speaking with, marketing directors at Heineken and them just looking at me going, Dio, what are you on about? Like, look at the market. These guys are online. And I'm sure obviously now we have over 125 million people in Nigeria online. It's the second biggest Bitcoin market in terms of volume after the United States. And it's just been absolutely explosive, right? So I know you can kind of relate, being an entrepreneur in that kind of fast-paced environment. But one thing that has struggled is e-commerce in Africa in general, particularly in places like Nigeria. And as someone I'm incredibly passionate about telling, the Black African story. I'm incredibly passionate about sharing our experiences and perspectives, because I think often people in the West try and sort of put playbooks, similar to probably what they did in China, that just simply don't work within the context, right? So I'm curious to kind of hear from you if you've ever thought about Africa, if you have any views around Africa. And more importantly, how do you get other people on side to sort of go with go with the playbook will work because you've been in the environment, you understand the West. I worked in the UK for many years before I came back to Nigeria. I've lived in 5 different continents. I've visited China and South States many times. So but I have an innate understanding of the people and the environment. How do we go about convincing other people? And I'm actually more interested in working with Chinese people, funny enough, than Western companies, because I feel like they're closer to the problem of not being fully understood.
Yeah.
That was my question. Yeah.
Great question, Theo. Yeah. No, look, I think that a few things. One is I'm very excited about the potential of the African market because, frankly, it's what many say is a handicap is actually its strength, much like what China was at the time. So Africa, has a little in the way of, legacy infrastructure. but it has a young population, which will, for those on the call, and Deo, you probably know, this will be the youngest working population in the world by 2030 or 2040. They'll have the highest number of working age people. And this is an opportunity, but it's also a potential risk if it's not well harnessed. And we've seen that as well. What can happen when youth feel disenfranchised and they're not given opportunities. So the Nigeria example is amazing to see how quickly things have changed. And it's the largest population in Africa by country size. Then on a much smaller basis, there's the miracle story of Rwanda, which on the other side of the continent is really making strides in transforming a society that was completely, obliterated because of the genocide and turned itself into one of the highest growth and most high potential sort of digital ecosystems, in its region. And I think that what this says to me is that the potential is there and the youth are ready and hungry for this. And when you talk about playbooks, it's about giving them the confidence to create the vision for themselves, learn from the lessons, and particularly the mistakes that have been made in other regions, both in China and the United States. But China is a more relatable experience because, like we talked about, they started with nothing and they're building it into something. Now, the challenge here is, how do you get the entrepreneurial sort of spirit and resource to be aligned with the public sector? And what I'll say in China is that there was a great sort of alignment behind the policies, the government investment, and the entrepreneurial sort of drive. And it's not that, the government did everything for the entrepreneurs. It's in some ways the government got out of the way and let the entrepreneurs do their job. And what the government needs to provide, however, is the basic infrastructure, like the roads, like the connectivity, like electricity, to be perfectly frank, because there are places in Africa that don't even have electricity 24 hours a day. And that is something that the public sector needs to help support. Now, in some cases, if it doesn't get provided, then the entrepreneurs also provide those solutions, which I think is amazing in parts of Africa where they're doing that. But the other thing I want to say, Deo, is that you represent an important part of this equation as part of the diaspora. A lot of Nigerian friends I have gone to the UK, United States, and are coming back. A lot of in Ethiopia, there's a lot of returnees that are well educated, well connected, and what's going to be required is the technical know-how, the business know-how, and the financial access and resources. China in the 1980s was not funded by large corporations or even, say, these sovereign funds or IFC or whatnot. The first wave of investment came from overseas Chinese, from Hong Kong, Taiwan, Malaysia, even the United States, maybe parts of Europe. It was overseas Chinese money reinvesting in their communities because they had family back here or they had ties to the country. So what I think Africa needs is a return of its diaspora. The brain power needs to come back to the continent to help contribute, but not try and replicate what's happened in London or Silicon Valley in Africa, but some sort of mix of that. And if you look at China, it's a mix. It was inspired by Silicon Valley. Jack will tell you he was inspired when he went to Silicon Valley. But what he created is a mix of Chinese and sort of Western sort of, thinking. And then it evolved even more so into a sort of Chinese/emerging markets sort of product. And if you look at what's happening in Southeast Asia, a lot of those models are following the China model because the conditions in Southeast Asia are similar to what was in China. So, kudos to you in the effort that you're making. I see you're like a 3-time entrepreneur. And, we trained through our program at Alibaba Business School over 1,000 entrepreneurs, digital entrepreneurs, some, who've never left the country, some who have gone abroad and are returning. But what really excites me is the excitement and the energy they have to building something in their own home countries. And I think that to me is probably the greatest gift that Alibaba has given in terms of the hope that societies and countries and people's living environments can be transformed because of the entrepreneurship that's happening everywhere.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I'll certainly keep up touch with the radii. Am I pronouncing it?
Radii. Yes.
Radii.
Cool.
I think that's fascinating, and congratulations with that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you all for your questions. Right now, we are ready to move on to our panel discussion. And I'm going to do a very quick session.
Do you want to do a very quick rap over the music, Ashley?
Absolutely.
There we go. Big rap. Go, Ashley.
Ooh, I was playing it in the background. Somehow people couldn't hear. Awesome. So we are talking about digital China today. We had a session on China's digital trends in the morning and Chinese consumers and Chinese marketing. This session is about China's e-commerce and new retail. The next session coming up in 2 hours will be about luxury and experiences. So still here today, I would like to encourage you to follow everybody on stage. Follow them with a bell. We brought you phenomenal experts in China's e-commerce and new retail space. Also, make sure that you are adding Shanghai Peggy, one word, on Wechat and asking her to add you to our curated Wechat group for speakers and participants of today's event to network and stay in touch with all of us. Right now, George is going to open the panel discussion, and finally, we're going to hear from more experts in the field. And in another half an hour or 40 minutes from now, we will open the Q&A again. So for now, our hand-raising function is off. In about 40 minutes from now, we're going to bring it back online, and we will be looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ashley, for being amazing and being present the entire time. How many hours have we gone so far? Let's see, 10 to 7. Let's see, 7 hours.
8 hours. Yeah.
8 hours. Oh my God. Oh yeah, that's right. We started at 9. So 8 hours. And Nishtha, you've been here the entire time as well, I believe. So incredible endurance. There's no way we could bring you this amazing quality content if we didn't work together. So for all of those of you in the audience who would like to join us and help moderate, help tweet, help organize, help share your stories, please add me at Shanghai Peggy. I'll make sure you're in the right group. We have China UAE, China Africa, China Brazil, China education, aging China, China sustainability, China digital transformation, moving to China, and many other topics I'm sure you're interested in sharing stories about. Let's work together. Let's bring China to the West.
All right. Thank you, Peggy and Ashley. So what we want to do in this session now is break it down to really the nitty-gritty daily grind in the trenches, e-commerce best practices for international brands that are of a medium to larger scale, that are in the market. And let me give you some context. The next session will be on cross-border e-commerce, which is much more suitable for medium-sized to smaller brands. But what we want to talk about now is brands that have a subsidiary on the ground in China or a retailer, which requires them to import the products. They need to pay tariffs. They need to have licenses in order to sell in the domestic market. Typically need to have a certain registered capital of 1 to 2 million RMB. They need to be able to issue 13% consumer invoices in order to open a shop on Tmall and JD. So keep in mind, this is rather for medium-sized to large-scale brands, and we're going to have another session right after that for smaller to mid-sized brands. And the way we want to run this session is to really talk in terms of case studies and active market participants. And with that, I would like to go into the first Q&A, starting with Thomas, who represents a German brand. So Thomas, let's start with you. Could you briefly introduce yourself? Then also, who is the brand that you work with, and what do they do? And then run us through your iteration, kind of that you went through with the brand in China in terms of establishing e-commerce and where you are today.
Thank you, George. Hello everybody, and thank you for selecting me to speak today on behalf of Hansgrohe. We are a German brand, as you said, and a global leader for premium and luxury bathroom solutions. Myself, I'm, as a group vice president for Asia, in charge for everything which happens in this part of the world, from New Zealand, Australia to India. And over the past 7 years, I have started out as part of the Chinese subsidiary at that time to establish our e-commerce channel. And since then, also due to the success we had, was able to transition into higher management roles. So I've lost a little bit touch on the nitty-gritty side of the details of how to run promotions today, but I'm sure also I can give a very good overview of the strategic questions and the general management perspectives international brands have to ask themselves, and what are actually the key success drivers for the different phases of establishing a strong e-commerce business. Maybe as a very short context about when you look at e-commerce for a bathroom brand like shower and faucet supplier, the way you need to see it in the context of the overall distribution setup is that we are usually 50% of our business is B2B related with large-scale property developers. And then we have the consumer channel, which is both retail presence. So Hansgrohe operates via partners, 500 stores across the country. And then we have our own operated e-commerce stores, both on Alibaba and Jingdong platforms, and are branching out from there now. So overall, e-commerce consists of around 12% sales of our China operations. We have scaled this over the last year successfully. And we are looking at overall a gross target for 2021 of more than 30%. So we're actually very bullish on the e-commerce development. We have established a scalable platform in the past years and actually working, also full disclosure with George together as a TP. I will elaborate on that a little bit later, on the importance of it, especially in the early phase. I think Brian already mentioned a great deal about it. So we are very bullish, confident that we can actually overperform in this channel. It's not only due to COVID reasons, but also due to the infrastructure investments and the integration into O2O, into the new retail system, which we're about to prepare. But let me touch about this a little bit later. Since George, I think in the past hours, I heard there's a very different, let's say, array of audience members from, let's say, younger brands, more just starting in China, be curious how to enter, to very established leading brands. So maybe we can run them through the 3-step process and the phases and what's important and what to take care of in each phase. What do you think?
Yep. Well, let's also hand over to Chloe because she might have to leave earlier. And she is ex-Alibaba, but now manages all of the e-commerce in the APAC region for L'Oreal. So let's hear from her in an entirely different category than faucets and showers, on her background and her experience with e-commerce on both the Alibaba and brand side right now.
Hi, George. Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. I also want to thank Brian because, your speech was very inspiring and it really reminds me of the old days. As he mentioned, we worked together in Alibaba from 2016. He is actually the one who recruited me and Sharon during the Alibaba Global Leadership Academy. So it was really nice to hear you again. It really reminds the old days. To introduce myself, I am Chloe Gonzalez. I joined Alibaba in 2016 as part of the leadership program and stayed for 4 years. I worked 6 months in AliExpress, 1.5 years in Tmall World, and then almost 2 years in Tmall Global. And basically my role was to help European cosmetics and mother and baby brands to enter the China market. And I recently left Alibaba last month and just joined L'Oreal as an e-commerce manager for Asia. And basically my role is to help L'Oreal brands accelerate in China. L'Oreal has more than 30 brands. We'll be focusing on the active cosmetic active division, so brands like Vichy, La Roche-Posay, SkinCeuticals, etc. So yeah, what can I say about e-commerce? I think the first thing to keep in mind, I think we have a lot of brands here who don't really know how to enter the market and maybe don't understand yet how e-commerce is working in China. But I think what is very important to keep in mind, and that is very different from the Western way to shop, is that in China, consumers use e-commerce to spend time and not to save time like we would do in Europe. So, they spend so much time on Taobao, on Tmall. They usually connect 6 to 7 times per day. Because it's not only about e-commerce, they can interact with the brand, they can follow brands, they can watch live streaming, they can read blogs, they can interact with KOLs. So I think it's really something that you have to keep in mind when you're a brand, is that e-commerce is not just to sell your products, but it's also to build your brand, interact with your consumers, and have a lot of creative activities.
Chloe, in that regard, I have one more question or actually point I want to make, which is that e-commerce these days is no longer just what we understand it to be, but also what Jack Ma in the end termed as new retail, which is, what in the Western world might be perceived as omnichannel or multi-channel, but in fact is much more integrated and powerful. So I want to briefly, before I also want to get Sharon involved, I wanted to point out Thomas's case and then also ask you, Chloe. So in the case of Thomas, what is very interesting for O2O is that the one thing is, if you buy one of the products on the Tmall shop, let's say a shower, which is a high ticket item, at the same time you can order installation. So they have a nationwide installation service that through Tmall or JD will then also send somebody to your home to install it. So that's kind of an example of downstream. And secondly, Thomas has integrated over 400 of the independent sellers that he mentioned that carry his brand into both upstream and downstream e-commerce, meaning that you can buy on the Tmall store, but you can pick it up offline, or you can walk into an offline store and then have it delivered from the central warehouse if you use Alipay to pay. So my question to you, Chloe, from L'Oreal in an entirely different category, what are the latest trends and applications that you see with new retail in your specific category?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Brian mentioned it a bit earlier that, in China, new retail is really about being consumer-centric compared to omnichannel, where in Europe or in the US, where you would have a retailer and he would build around himself an app, a website, his social media channel. But in China, it's really putting the consumer at the center and then building around that all the supply chain, the product, the operation, the marketing. In terms of cosmetics, I think we've seen a lot of interesting trends. One I have in mind is, for example, the magic mirror that you can find in a lot of shopping malls and a lot of bathrooms around China, where, while waiting or queuing for going to the restroom, you have this mirror where you can actually check the latest cosmetics products available on Tmall and try them on. So you would see, the lipstick on your lips and see how it looks. And if you like it, you can scan the QR code, and then the product will be delivered directly to your home. So this is one of the examples that cosmetic brands can use and really use this O2O channel to have interactions with the brand offline, but also online.
And I'm sure we can also order your brands through Alibaba or other O2O platforms, right, where independent stores of retailers use Alibaba's marketplace or Meituan's to, within 20 minutes, half an hour, deliver you the products instantly, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Alibaba has such a big ecosystem. So, as long as you're part of the ecosystem, you can use all the resources, whether it's marketing with Alibaba, whether it's logistics, with all the different actors from the group. So it's really interesting to have a seamless experience. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of Alibaba, let me hand over to Sharon. And Sharon is currently Director of Global Key Accounts, but in her previous role, she was one of those very powerful category managers in Tmall, feared by the Tmall's, loved by the Tmall partners, loved by the brands. Welcome,
like
Sharon.
To say that in public, George.
No.
We
But
like to keep
like
that
I
a
said,
secret.
okay. Like I said, you guys play an extremely important role because in the end, the way that Alibaba is set up is in very high level categories that are then broken down into a second and third tier, and everything is very, very well organized. And so when you open a store or when you choose to launch your brand or a multi-brand store, initially you are tied to a certain category, and the Alibaba category manager or JD category manager will be that key account contact that will help you scale the brand, work with the TP, advise you on marketing, and get you into large initiatives like 11.11 and so on. So tell us a little bit about, firstly, yourself, Sharon, and then specifically how in that role you worked with Western brands and Chinese brands, and how you coach them, but also encourage them in their initiatives to increase sales and advertising exposure.
Sure. Thanks, George. And thanks, Brian, also for inviting me into the group. My name is Sharon Guy. I'm currently the Director of Global Key Accounts as part of Tmall World. So that's also a business unit that Chloe was part of. But like George said, my previous role was in Tmall Domestic, so Tmall China. And to some brands that's joining us, Tmall Global, Tmall World, Tmall China, it might be all extremely confusing for you. And that is perfectly understandable because sometimes not just the brands, the partners included are quite scratching their heads over the terms that we use. So just a introduction on differences between China and Tmall Global is Tmall China is we're doing mostly the domestic business. So that is a local merchant, a Chinese entity selling directly to a Chinese consumer. That is different to Tmall Global, which is usually when foreign brands are selling into China to a Chinese consumer, when their entity is not located in China or when their goods are not located in China yet, and yet their goods are still located abroad. So that is the big differentiation. And speaking towards the category piece, I do think that is the beauty of Tmall China, which is quite mature in terms of an e-commerce platform. If you're comparing it to something like Lazada or Shopee or maybe Mercado Libre in South America, in that Tmall China is very specific with their definition of categories and their organization of essentially organizing products into specific categories. So a brief overview of our categories, and brands that are listening in, you'll probably fall into one of these. Our fashion is a large category for us in Tmall China. FMCG is another very large category for us. You'll have mother and baby, which is another very large category for us. Home goods, another large category. Anything that's related to cars, that's a new category that's recently emerged that's very quickly growing. These are just some of the examples. So we call these to be first layer categories, and not to get into too much detail of how we categorize things, but this knowledge management system is truly what sets Tmall China apart from some of the maybe younger e-commerce platforms that are in other parts of the world. And the role of the category manager is pretty interesting in that it has a holistic view on all the brands and products in a specific category. So I used to be in FMCG. Specifically in FMCG, I used to be in the food category, looking over dairy and beverages. So anything that is a liquid technically or drinkable would fall under us. And we would be talking to a lot of brands, both Western brands or foreign brands, and also local Chinese brands in helping them grow their business after they have opened a store on the platform in Tmall China. And so there's a numerous amount of tools in Tmall China as to how to advertise in the platform to grow the e-commerce store in terms of traffic and sales. And so part of the category manager's job was to look at holistically the entire category and how to assist certain brands in the category to grow the overall category. So a brief introduction on the role.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And I want to come back to you afterwards, or actually all the panelists, with one rapid-fire question. But before that, I also want to get Josh and Fabian involved. Firstly, Josh, welcome. If you would like to give a quick introduction about yourself and what your business does. And I think you are the perfect segue to what Sharon talked about, namely that Alibaba is a very complex ecosystem, and it is almost impossible for a brand to entirely self-operate a Tmall store from beginning to end across logistics and design and service and digital marketing and payment. And that's why companies like yours, Kung Fu Data, and mine exist as a bridge between the brand and the merchant, and then ultimately the consumer.
So first, I want to thank you guys for having me. I'm extremely grateful to be on this panel and with some really amazing people. And George, you're doing a phenomenal job, you and Ashley. I mean, you guys have a lot of stamina, and I'm very impressed on Chinese New Year weekend that you all came out and put this together, because it's a marathon. So well done to you both and to everyone on this panel. What I would start with is my business is very similar to George. We operate a lot in the domestic space. Most of the brands we run are domestic stores or have domestic flagships on both JD and Tmall. And when it comes to, I guess, coming into the market, one of the things that you mentioned, I think, is very clear is how complicated it really is. One thing you mentioned that I think is more relevant than almost anything else is the amount of human labor required to properly manage a store. And, you know, what I would say there is that more than half of transactions that we process on a daily basis are in some ways going through the assisted selling. And so when you talk about need to have talent or to be able to self-operate, one of the first things is to have a team that's very deep and knowledgeable about how to assist with selling and about how to promote brands and products in the platform. And another big layer of complexity, which was also mentioned, is working with category managers like Sharon. The category managers know so much, and they bring opportunities to brands. So if things are being properly done and your store has the right ratings and has promise, there's lots of traction with the brand, then the category management is going to come to you with a lot of opportunities that don't just involve the Alibaba ecosystem as a typical brand would see in, like, for example, Amazon. You have a buy box, you can buy some traffic, and you know, you can scale that way. But it's very different in Alibaba. It is a entertainment mecca. And Chloe mentioned the amount of, I guess, sheer tools and opportunities to engage with consumers at all levels in their life and at all times that they're interested in engaging with you. It's just omniscient. And so when a category manager comes to you, they may have a list of KOLs they want you to work with, a big event coming up. You have to integrate, you know, marketing in like 5 platforms for one event. And I think that just the pressure to perform for that event and to integrate so many different components of the ecosystem into a successful campaign, I think that alone really commands sort of, I guess, just humility, right, of the brand and even of the operators themselves. You know, it is hard to do everything yourself. And I think self-operation is really for brands that are really deep in China, have been there a very, very long time, have a huge team, and are willing to take on the responsibilities of what an operator like yourself or myself has to deal with on a daily basis, because it's unbelievable, yeah? I don't even know how to describe it.
Welcome to our world. Thank you, Josh. I want to get one last panelist introduced and involve Fabian, and then go into a quick kind of rapid-fire question session with all of you. And I invited Fabian on the panel because he is an advisor with a law firm who can give more information on the legal side of things and the taxation side of things, specifically when we talk about a brand setting up a company in China or engaging in direct-to-consumer e-commerce. So very briefly, Fabian, can you introduce yourself and then maybe give us your top 3 challenges that you usually see for brands that either want to set up direct-to-consumer e-commerce in China from a legal or tax perspective, or what you help them solve, and kind of what you see that there's at least the success factors in those very basic tasks that should not be underestimated to get started.
Absolutely. Thanks, George, Ashley, Peggy, and everybody else who's made this possible today. Right. So I help advise mostly foreign companies that are coming into China and are really looking to benefit from the vast and growing consumer markets in China. I think the number one topic that we see and that unfortunately actually can destroy a lot of companies' success here in China and all of the things that we've been talking about here since 9 a.m. None of these things would be possible without companies having an actual brand and then one that is registered, the logo, the Chinese name, the English name across all the different classes that are applicable
trademark
to that company to trademark, exactly, and Apple and a couple of other large companies can tell you a few things about how not to do it, so that's the biggest issue that we have, right? And so Alibaba and JD and most of the other platforms now require companies to even show if they have a brand to show that they own that brand. Otherwise, they're usually not allowed to even open a store and be available.
And we want to clarify there, just very briefly, we want to clarify this is not about fakes, which used to be a story and a problem in the past. This is not that Chinese brands copy Western brands. It's quite the opposite. It's that China has a first come, first served trademark principle, meaning that whoever registered is first and uses it owns the trademark in the market. So we've really seen the problem of counterfeits and fake solved, but now it's really more of a branding and trademark issue. And so I think a very big learning here is for anybody in the audience, make sure you secure your trademarks in China, in Chinese and in English in all the relevant categories.
Yeah, absolutely. It's simply going to a different jurisdiction and expecting that the rules of your home jurisdiction apply. That's it's a great idea, but I've got news for you. That's not how the world works, and that's not how any other jurisdiction works. That's not a China-specific rule there. The other thing is that becomes a lot more relevant is advertising. We have seen foreign companies and Chinese companies getting in trouble in violation of advertising laws and other sort of unfair competition laws. So that is something that companies should make a lot more or pay a lot more attention to when it comes to, for example, just depicting the map of China, right? That's a risky issue. And so that might be something that due consideration should be taken in that sense. And then actually one of the things is specifically with the import of products is labeling, making sure that the Chinese, everything is in Chinese there, that the ingredients are there, all of the required information are on the products when they come into China, if they do come into China, of course. So that's there's quite a bit of compliance and risk for companies that don't pay enough attention to that. That can get a bit costly because China's definitely put more emphasis on securing and protecting the rights of consumers over the last couple of years.
George, would you allow me, from a brand side, a comment? I mean, we are talking a lot about the setup phase, right, of companies. And I think one of the most important things everybody should consider is really choosing the right partner. Plus, if possible, the right talent for internal e-commerce management. I think Brian has touched on that. So I think the right TP and also a legal advisor or even someone who can handle your digital marketing levers properly. I think at the end, everybody should understand if you really want to enter China, and I think Ashley said that very rightly earlier in the session, that she said you need to be ready to invest, to commit resources. And it's very crucial to invest into the right partner to accelerate your learning curve. Because if you're trying to learn everything by yourself, China is so fast, most people will not be able to cope with it. So choose a TP, choose a consultant for a specific area, and just invest into it, because you get your learning curve accelerated by so much. It's definitely worth the money.
Thanks, Thomas. And everybody on the panel, let's go into a free discussion. Please feel free to contribute. Let's talk about key success factors that you believe are the most important for foreign brands in the Chinese market. And let's do that for 15, 20 minutes maximum, and then open up to the floor for questions and have a more extended discussion. So please, whoever wants to contribute, go ahead. Josh?
Yeah, I want to just mention one thing, because it wasn't mentioned earlier by Brian or the team at Alibaba, but it is something that they've done a remarkable job with, and that is pioneering authorized commerce. This concept of having, a brand-specific mall that has VIP status, that these stores, the listings in those stores, have the power to retake control of all of their own traffic and transactions in these platforms. And it gives the brand a lot of control over its destiny. So a lot of the customers that we deal with have pretty complicated ecosystems in China. So they'll have, very established distribution. They'll have partners on and offline. They'll have people that don't play nice, that are squatting on their trademark or using authorization letters to open stores that aren't real. And I think Alibaba's team does a great job of helping brands sort of navigate this situation and also, get things right for them. And as an operator, I think one of your key jobs when you do take on a new brand is to really make sure that the marketplace is ready for the brand, that they have the trademarks and the rights to their traffic, and you can register properly before going through that investment period. So beyond resources, it's also having the structures in place and sort of the support on the back end to make sure that you're going to be able to sort of own the prize. I see a lot of clients that, don't do this, as Fabian mentioned, and get into a lot of trouble, or they invest heavily without really understanding, how to own their sort of path to purchase. And I think that the team at Alibaba has done a great job of making it easy for you to do that, but you have to get things right, and you need to use third parties, as Thomas mentioned, and make sure you have partners that are working in your best interest and genuinely want to make sure that your entry into China goes as smooth as possible.
I mean,
Thank
what you want to
Any
own
of the
as
other
a brand, what you want to own as a brand is a clear and a staged e-commerce strategy. So you need to be clear in which stage you are and focus on the 3 or 4 key deliverables for that stage. So if you're in a setup stage, you need to first get yourself comfortable and go through the learning curve. If you are, let's say, in a scaling phase, later on, it's about localizing content production, making sure you're faster, more agile. So I think at the end, you need to really develop a staged model and build the organization around it, because you can lose yourself so easily in the China ecosystem and by trying to do everything at the same time. And at the end, you need to go through each stage gate with clear deliverables and clear focus, and try to accelerate the time you need to spend in each of those stage gates, but at the end be very focused. I think that's, from my learning over the past 5 years, something which is very helpful, because, from our end, we started clearly with a focus on Alibaba. We added only 3-4 years later other platforms, because we felt we are ready for it. And you need to think about organizational complexity and organizational capability as much as you think about your products or your supply chain.
All right. Any other contributions from the panelists on what you believe are the top 2 to 3 success factors for a brand, a foreign brand that wants to set up domestic e-commerce?
Yeah, I would just like to to jump in there just very briefly.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi. I think Josh and Thomas both mentioned this, that there's a lot of help and you get offered, as a brand, you get offered a lot of advice, both from the side of Alibaba and also from the side of whoever are your operators, your TP or whoever. But you actually have to take this advice as a brand. It's no good just to have it and then to say, yeah, but our brand does things differently. So it's important, it's really important that brands take that information on board and actually think about how they can best implement that while still remaining true to what is their brand core.
I agree. I also think you need a defendable position. And that's something that comes from both brand strength and resources, and of course the right structures in place and talent. So I think the complexity involved here is just making sure that you own everything that can be built. And when you scale, as Thomas said, to a different level, and your business is at scale and you want to really grow, that, you know, you have a defendable position with consumers and with competitors. Because I think underestimating your competition in China and even your competition for resources within a big platform like Alibaba, access to events and traffic, and the amount of inputs, both capital and people and assets that you need to perform well in any given event is much, it's exponentially harder. Or I should say exponentially more work and operational intensity required to drive success. And I think it makes you as a brand better overall, not just in China, but out when you start building these kinds of assets and using them in your business in China.
And apologies, Catherine, that we didn't introduce you previously because we want to feature you more in the cross-border session, which is up next. But just as a quick background, I think you worked for almost 20 years with the German infant formula brand HIP, and through that have a vast experience in building up e-commerce and running it in China.
Thanks.
So any other panelists that would like to contribute some of their learnings, best practices, and then we'll go into inviting the audience on stage for questions.
Hi, George. Can I add a view here? A view combined with a question. Okay. Hi, my name is Nishtha. I'm also a moderator, but also a keen listener to this session. Learned a lot, so thank you so much. I've been working a lot recently on social commerce. And one of the learnings, having worked in China for 16 years, also on e-commerce, is the role of customer service. As we all know that the differentiator factor and having a great customer service through e-commerce creates not just brand loyalty, but reduces customer churn. And that's very critical. And my observation and a question to the panelists is that a lot of the local brands actually are upping their game on extremely amazing customer service, which is actually giving them a competitive edge to even a lot of the international brands. Do you have a view or an observation example on a brand which is not giving a great, let's say, a learning from a not so great successful customer service versus an exceptional customer service? Any view on that from the amazing panelists as a competitive edge? Josh?
I think it's hard. I mean, George and I, it would be hard for us to give you a bad example because I think as an operator, first and foremost, if your score, your DSR, which includes customer service inputs, is not perfect, you get kicked out and can't get into events. So by its nature, I mean, George will tell you this, I mean, you can't fail or you're out of the pool, you're out of the game,
exactly.
You get kicked out of the event. So I think exceptional customer service is more of a standard rather than an exception for everyone on this call.
You're an expert, so I wouldn't challenge that. But even as a normal consumer shopping a lot on e-commerce, I know it's a norm, it's hygiene. But still, we see, and I mean, I also work with brands. Obviously, you are hardcore in e-commerce. But exceptional, when I say, is like A+++++. So don't you think that there is a difference between hygiene customer service and extremely well customer service, which can make or break your competitive edge? Any great example?
I think I don't have one off the top of my head. I have one client who does a really great job with back-end customer service. So we would call it back-end brand support. So beyond the experience to stay competitive and have a high rank and keep the recommendation engine running in your favor, they go above and beyond the call of duty with giftware. And they really take the time to make packaging and delivery as an experience, as part of the brand. And I think this is something everyone can learn on this call. One of the things I noticed with brands that are not in a premium category, or even some of them in a premium sort of category, they go cheap on packaging, right? And the experience of the consumer when they receive it and how they're treated after sale tends to be not that great. And I think the local brands, the Guohuo, they're doing a great job of this, like really providing an exceptional.
I can give one more example. Nishtha, one more example, and which again is perceived as absolute standard by Josh and myself and our clients, including Hans Grohe and the category managers. But for a Westerner, this might be mind-blowing, and that is that nowadays, in the last 1 year, 1.5 years, it has become standard that you do at least 8 hours live streaming on your flagship store. So that is in the Taobao Live app. And this is just like you would have a website in the West or an Amazon store. And if a consumer visits that website, there's a real person doing real TV shopping 2.0, 8 hours per day, and they will answer all your questions. They will showcase the product. And, again, we perceive this as standard because the China market is so fast moving and sets new standards so quickly. But for a Western brand, this might be mind blowing that you actually have to pay somebody that does nothing but 8 hours live stream, 7 days a week, 360 days per year.
Oh, awesome example, George. Both of us were forced into this a couple of years ago to build a studio in-house. So I'm sure you feel the same. It's intense, And Nishtha, that is a lot of customer service. You think of it as experiential marketing, live commerce, as we know it outside of China is very different from inside China. And what George just described to you is standard issue now for all of us, that is just part of what we do. We're like entertainers.
Thank you.
That's one of the key challenges, I think, for multinational companies is that now the learning curve is reversed, right? In the past, I'm in China since almost 20 years. So we brought a lot of knowledge into the Chinese organization, but right now the music is happening here. So, but still a lot of decisions or influence is taken in headquarters. So now, how do we bring this understanding about the China ecosystem, the trends, which might be even 3-4 years down the road, trends in the Western world, into headquarters? It's a mindset challenge, but also it needs the reverse engineering of platforms to share knowledge and to share capability. And I think that's also something where I think an international TP can help, or very experienced e-commerce managers, because it is now the headquarter who needs to learn from China rather than the other way around.
Thank you so much, all, and totally agree with all of your comments. In fact, Chinese consumers are the most spoiled in the world, and the expectations are very, very high, and that also keeps the whole industry on their on their tiptoes, which is beautiful in general. Developing e-commerce and the new retail truly with China speed and for a very unique consumer. I would like to quickly reset the room. We are doing the huge Digital China Day today, 12 hours from 9 a.m. China time to 9 p.m. China time. This is our 4th session for today. And here we're talking about China's e-commerce and new retail. Right now, we are ready to open this room for questions from the audience. Let me remind you how this is done. If you would like to ask a question, and we will allow raising hands right now as I speak, you need to, first of all, go to your bio, and in your bio, edit your bio and write, if you have a question, write the word question, and then quickly summarize what you want to ask. If you want to contribute, write the word contribute, and then write a couple of words to describe what exactly your contribution is going to be about. Right now, I'm opening our hand-raising function. So after you have edited your bio, make sure that you go and raise your hand. We're going to be curating a list of people that want to come up on stage to address our speakers. I also would like to remind you to follow the amazing moderators and speakers on stage right now. Peggy is a phenomenal force of nature that brings the whole China and Western community together, not only on Clubhouse, but on many, many other channels. Do follow her. And I would also recommend you to add Peggy's WeChat, which is Shanghai Peggy, one word. As you add her on WeChat, you can join other amazing curated WeChat groups connected with Clubhouse. We have groups on China and UAE, moving to China, China and Africa, China and Brazil, China digital transformation, China education, aging in China, China sustainability, and many others. At the same time, follow George, who is moderating this session. He is an absolutely amazing expert in the new retail and e-commerce space. Nishtha is phenomenal. George is phenomenal. Catherine, Fabian, Chloe, Thomas, and Sharon are all phenomenal. You must follow them right now with a bell. And now, we already have a few hands raised. George can moderate and pick people to get on stage and ask their questions.
Yes, and actually we already have one person on stage who would like to ask a question. Hi, Shubai, please go ahead and pose your question to any of the panelists. The stage is yours. Shubai.
Okay, thank you, George. Thank you, Ashley. I already follow your advices. I added Peggy. I'd like to first thank Peggy for your invitation, and I thank all the panelists here for the wonderful discussion. And I appreciate everybody here spending, a wonderful afternoon to discuss digital marketing in China. Now, we heard a lot about double cycling, 双循环, and especially 内循环 and the inner cycling. My question is really to any kind of experts with the cross-border brand launching. For example, my area is in skincare business. And we know that China imports a lot of skincare brands, and especially high-end luxury brands. And my question is for those who have experience or who can share the stories on skincare brand launch in both China and overseas. How do you operate, and especially take advantage of social media like YouTube or Xiaohongshu or Instagram, and if there's any good story to share? Thank you.
Chloe, do you want to go first, since this is really your expertise?
Yes, sure. So as Sharon mentioned, cross-border e-commerce is, you don't have to have a China entity. You can do cross-border e-commerce and sell your products directly out there in your home country. So that's why on Timo Global, the biggest category is cosmetics, because a lot of brands cannot do animal testing. So I think for skincare brands, what is really important to do is to pick 1 or 2 hero products maximum when you want to enter the market and do your marketing investments. Why is that? It's because there is so many competitors, so many products out there, and it's very important that you focus on this 1 or 2 hero SKU, meaning that from your marketing budget, usually we advise, from your sales target, your yearly sales target, to invest 20 to 30% in marketing, and then within this marketing budget, I would invest maybe 60% of this marketing budget within this 1 euro SKU. This way, Chinese consumers will really associate this product to your brand. And when they go on Red, or when they go on WeChat, or when they go on Taobao, when they go on Weibo, etc., they will directly, find KOLs or bloggers talking about this specific product, which will bring traffic to your store. And then once consumers are within your store, then you can sell this hero product in a bundle with other product from your range. So that would be one of the tips I would give for beauty brands.
Any other colleagues want to give a tip specifically for beauty brands in the domestic market? Otherwise, let's go to the next audience member. Pinaman, you had a question. Please go ahead. The stage is yours.
Hi. Thank you, George. Thank you, everyone, for such an insightful conversation. I joined in about an hour and a bit ago, so it was really nice to just listen to what's going on in the China market. So I have a startup that is focusing on getting African brands and sustainable brands to the global market. And China market, given China's interest in Africa, is a market that I'm really focused on. We're pre-launch. But I'm just wondering, what is any advice for a startup that is really interested to tap into the consumer segment, that is interested in sustainable brands on the in the China market? What is the best way to engage, to have the China market on our radar, because we're pre-launch? So any insights so that we can leverage your expertise and get into the Chinese market?
Who wants to give it a go? One idea is Sharon, maybe, because you mentioned you also worked in especially the food category, and Africa is a huge resource when it comes to commodities. And I know for a fact that Alibaba is also very active in direct sourcing, be it with the TDI program or with Helma, and increasingly tap into producers right in the home country to then sell to Chinese consumers.
Yeah, sure. How would I say your name? Pinamon? What is your product?
Yeah, so we're sustainable fashion. So sustainable fashion and lifestyle products. Okay. So our marketplace aggregates small independent brands to try and get them access to market.
Okay. So from a consumer point of view, sustainability is going to has already been actually, and will become a growing topic. So any brand that is in the sustainable field, I highly encourage you to look at Tmall as a source. And if you have other questions, definitely ask George or Josh on specific questions as to how to open that store and even how to open that channel up. I think when we're looking at sustainability, what differentiates any brand from another on the platform is its story. That is pretty much what is capturing the eyeballs, if you will, of a Chinese consumer when they're browsing, when they're sitting on their couch at 8 p.m. at night, and have some spare moments, and they're opening Taobao because they're just bored. And there are these banners that swipe across the screen. So for those of you who haven't experienced the Taobao app yet, I encourage you to download it also, and just to have a look at what it is and to have an experience of how it works. Because from a visual perspective, having the app and just playing with it and clicking on the products, it's quite interesting. And so anything to do with a sustainability theme is going to be a highlight soon. For the platform, because from a consumer trend perspective, a lot of people are being a lot more conscious with what they're buying and the effects on the environment with the waste in terms of packaging. A lot of brands now are being more and more innovative with what they're using as packaging, that it's biodegradable. So it's happening. And so if you're a part of that space, definitely Tmall is a good platform to tell that story.
Okay. And would you advise that we co-launch in Tmall at the same time as launching elsewhere? Or should we wait to get more insight? Because I've been reading about the Chinese consumer segment and their interest in sustainability. So would you suggest that we launch at the same time as we're launching elsewhere?
I think that depends on your ultimate goal and how much budget you ultimately have, because turning on each channel will be an addition to the total budget that you have. So turning on Tmall will have its own annual fees, deposits, commission, prices, logistics, TP fees, so on and so on. Turning on JD will have its own set of prices. Turning on Little Red Book, which is another channel, it will be its own package again. So It just depends on the budget initially. And there's a very good report that I had seen Ashley put out a couple of months ago, where she differentiates between or amongst all of the different channels and sort of what each channel represents in terms of the type of consumers that each channel has, the spending amount, what they're interested. Yeah, so definitely study that a bit and learn about all the channels before deciding which channel to ultimately open, because it is, I think it's without a question, whether you're a very, very large brand, you're a medium-sized brand, you're a very, very small brand, everyone's budget is...
we're carrying these small...
tight. Exactly. Yeah. So it's good to always research as holistically as you can before you make a decision.
So, we're going to go on for at least another hour, so please stick with us, and we're going to talk about cross-border specifically, so hopefully there's more useful information for you later on in the session. Sorry for interrupting. Who wanted to?
No, I shall. Thank you.
Well, I was just going to make one recommendation because it's sustainable fashion. So I have a connection if you want. It might be a way to start that's, let's call it less capital heavy. Yeah. So a lot of, launches, and Sharon was trying to explain it depends on what you want to achieve, right? When you launch a store, a couple of things to look into. One, if Alibaba's team is very keen on developing a category, they will grab a bunch of brands at the same time and help build it. They'll drive it. So one thing would be to reach out and see how far along they are there and whether they really want to take it on. The second is...
Any introductions over there?
Ask Sharon and Chloe. One other thing I might recommend is to look up, I'm trying to remember her name, but I can actually introduce you to her on Wechat if you connect with me. But someone started a company called Shop Shops, which is basically a live stream service for independent fashion designers. And the original sort of model was to do it from New York into Taobao and Tmall and just interview the shops. And I think to test the market, the nice part about this model is that I think it's just consignment. It's digital consignment for you. You may have marketing expenses, but it's a lot less capital intensive, and you would be able to sort of test the response rate of Chinese consumers to sustainable fashion stories coming from Africa, for example. And then my third recommendation to you would be to look at activation as your core problem. And Chloe mentioned it. I mean, you're going to be spending most of your time trying to get stories told and get people talking about the brands. And if it is a multi-brand portfolio, it sounds like there's a lot of different brands or personalities involved, then you really need to have this come to the front, and commerce sort of come as a result of the efforts of getting people to talk about the brand and seeding it properly in the market and getting the product into the market in a way that allows, build traction, so to speak. Best.
All right.
George. That's really helpful. Thanks.
One more person, Gökhan, who I saw is working in design architecture.
Yeah, hi. I want to thank you. I want to thank, this has been very informative. I've been looking at the Chinese market for a promotional group from Turkey. Yeah, hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so here's my question.
We can hear you.
I'm working as a lead consultant on a promotional group for Turkish stones, which is a natural stone products from Turkey. And we have been looking at the Chinese market for about a year now, trying to both market to consumers and also to architects and designers, B2B. And it's been slightly confusing because there's been a lot of different channels proposed, and we're not actually doing e-commerce. We're just starting with promotion, and we're a non-governmental organization helping the Turkish stone industry doing this. So I want to know if you have any suggestions about digital marketing where it's just promotion, because we don't actually do the sales. The individual companies do the sales. Do we work with like a digital agency, or everybody's been mentioning working with one particular platform, which is, I think, seems to be a great way to start to compartmentalize your goals and everything. So any suggestions about promotion before e-commerce and enabling other people's e-commerce in terms of the members of our promotional group, the individual stone providers in Turkey that are selling to China? And China is Turkey's largest stone customer. So we've been working in China for many years, but more on a commodity basis. And now we want to try to figure out how to make individual Turkish stones and marbles known by Chinese consumers and also architects and designers. So that would be my question: promotion before e-commerce.
Gotcha. I can give you a very brief answer and then hand over to the panelists, and that is because we used to work with a company called PGI, Platinum Guild International. It's actually not a company, it's also a roof organization. In the end, it's the Platinum Lobby, and their sole interest was to promote platinum over other precious metals such as gold or silver. And so I think what you said is you shouldn't underestimate the power that you have as a ingredient brand or as an organization to help your market partners, like your importers and your ultimate resellers, to also support them with e-commerce, and that could be in the way of subsidizing them if they do ingredient branding, if they use a certain batch or certification that you might have, and then you would subsidize a certain amount of budget that they could use to spend on the e-commerce marketplaces, as well as a lot of educational content that you can provide them, just like a franchise giver would do, that they then can seed on the e-commerce marketplaces on the product pages. Also, I'm very sorry, could you mute your microphone? Anybody else have an advice for, in this case, heavy industries, stone category, which again, I believe is not out of the question at all for being suitable for China e-commerce. You would be surprised how even such products are bought by consumers. And I have another example I can give if none of the other.
So in terms of digital marketing, let me pick it up from here, George. In terms of digital marketing, I would say that it's definitely necessary to build a certain presence on digital channels, and you would most definitely need to use Zhihu as a Chinese core, because whenever it's a more professional kind of content, Zhihu articles are performing very, very well. And if you do not have, for example, a ranking website in mainland China, the one that is actually located, within China borders with its service and registration, so it doesn't rank, or for example, this website is linked to international social media platforms and it's loading very, very slowly. You don't need to have a place like website for China. What you need to have is a couple of really cool social media platforms, and of course, a couple of really in-depth, interesting articles on Zhihu, and Zhihu will help you rank very high on Baidu. So you need to answer the question, who are your customers? Who are we trying to reach? Is it general public? Well, general public in China doesn't work. It's 1.4 billion people, and we just simply do not have money to go for general public. That is why we need to segment, and I always recommend to choose maximum 2 to 3 consumer groups that we are after. So are these people that are purchasing stones for themselves? Are these, B2B people from the industry that are working with some of these stones, etc., etc. So segment who they are very, very clearly, and then you need to understand the complexity of their digital journey. So where are they doing research? Where do they spend most of their time? How can we capture them, meet them at the right place in the right time in the journey? And essentially, from what I hear, without going into detail, I think that Zhihu would be a great platform. You can also consider I would say Red can be okay. Wechat is not a bad platform if you are willing to actually go deeper and turn it into some sort of, CRM and social CRM, where there will be a person who operates the account on the background and replies and provides more information. Weibo is going through a bit of a transition. It's like Chinese, essentially Facebook plus Twitter plus a lot of other things. They're going through a bit of transition because they essentially have a lot of bots in their platform, and very often traffic is inflated. Nonetheless, they're still very good when you're trying to communicate something visual and, tell your story through kind of viral content or content that is targeting certain users. In terms of videos, I'm just not sure what exactly is the focus of, of those companies that you are representing. But essentially, in China, what works when it comes to marketing is country country branding. So if we're talking about, I do not know, selling champagne, then champagne needs to come from France. If we're selling about, selling stones, so we need to explain them why our stones are the best, right? And we need to build, essentially, in the minds of the consumers, this link between the country and the product that we're trying to create. If it's already inherently there, if people think that, oh my God, milk from New Zealand is great, then you have a much easier job to kickstart that community and that conversation and do this, marketing. For example, tourism board of Japan is having probably the easiest job in the world, or tourism board of Singapore. They're also representing a collection of different businesses, but essentially their goal is to attract people to come travel to Singapore. Because it has already such a great reputation and people know that this is one of their most top desired destinations to go to. So for you, you need to understand where right now on this journey are you? Do people know that great stones come from, and I think I heard it correctly, was it Turkey? Yes, it is Turkish stones. Yeah, great. So do people know that already in China? You need to be very clear about that. Or do they not know? If they don't know that yet, if the link is not yet established, that you need to start from education, explaining why it is great, and this is going to be a longer journey. And then if people already know, again, those people that you are targeting, then you have a lot of place to play with execution and, implementation. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's it corroborates what we've been hearing from the various agencies that we've reached out to. But when we work with the agencies, they would give us like a whole list of things, and it was hard to figure out exactly which way to go. So just as a follow-up question, you mentioned working directly with the Juho or Red. Does that mean that we can just go directly to them and we don't need an agency, we don't need to go to digital agency, that they'll help us with the creative and with the planning, media planning, etc. within that channel? Does there need to be a separate agency that handles all that?
Right. You need to have an agency because the platform will never help you create the content. So you need an agency that actually creates metrics for you, like social media metrics, that actually understands the China market, that does also research for you on the Chinese consumers and understand, how you are going to execute all that. Then the agency that stays on top of your progress, maybe in 3 months you will figure out that the strategy you have, designed together with them is not working. So you need to tweak it. So somebody who's on top of the hot trends, somebody who understands the platform, somebody who has collaboration with the platforms. So somebody who actually works closely with Weibo or Zhihu or Red, and they're able to get more preferential fees from them and more preferential, terms maybe. So definitely work with an agency and definitely make sure that you are very selective. You don't need to be on all social media platforms or digital platforms in China. It's just not realistic. You probably need 2 to 3 to start with. And it's extremely, extremely exciting.
Yeah, the Turkish stones is already fairly well known on the business side in China. So now this migration to the consumers and architects and designers is what we're trying to achieve. So thank you for that. And the agency problem, we've had a problem finding an agency because we are not a huge consumer brand. We're very specific to like luxury and hospitality, things like that. So the proposals we've gotten from the big agencies has been the budgets have been way out of scope. And it's been a kind of forest to find an agency within the kind of specific focus, the specific space we're in. So last question is, how would you accessing these kind of smaller, mid-sized level agencies that work in your area? Any suggestions about where to pursue that? And thank you for your responses. It's been very informative.
Absolutely. So there are tons of agencies within mainland China borders with presence outside. And I think, you really need to probably talk in detail with 2 to 3 agencies to decide which one is more fitting to your specific case. But feel free to send me an email. My email is in my bio, and I would be very happy to introduce you to a couple of agencies and also pass your specific case to my team. And then you can basically see who works best. But there is a ton of qualified agencies out there, and most of them are located within, mainland China borders. And sometimes, as you mentioned, it's not obvious, who to go with because again, the choices are just so big, and you're looking for something very particular.
Okay, thank you very much to the panel, and it's been very, very informative, and I'm glad that Clubhouse is now providing these kind of ways to access wonderful people like yourselves. Thank you.
Delighted to have you. Thank you.
You're welcome. All the best. I'm excited, guys. I promise whatever I build next, I will look out for your stone that I was previously not aware of.
It's good. It's a fine way, and it also fits into wellness trends. It's a natural material, it helps with health, and we have a history. In fact, Chinese tourism to Cappadocia, for example, has been very. I go back and forth there, and every time the plane is packed with Chinese tourists the last 3 or 4 years. So it's been exciting to see that also. This kind of sort of Asian, West Asia, East Asia. Cross interaction, both on the consumer side, but also in tourism.
Okay, with that, Ashley, do you want to reset the room and we move into the last session that is then followed by a big group discussion and Q&A?
Absolutely. So let me reset the room. We are here talking about digital China. We are right now in the section on China's e-commerce and new retail. We are moving on to the Q&A session. We have phenomenal experts here that represent TP partners, George and Josh. We have people that represent brands. We have people representing e-commerce platforms. So an amazing collection of speakers. If you would like to ask them a question, again, what do you do? First of all, you go to your bio, you add a question or a contribution as the first line, and essentially you explain us in a few words what exactly do you want to ask or contribute, and we're going to pull you on stage.
Thank you, Ashley. So welcome everybody who recently joined, and as a quick introduction, what we're going to do now is talk specifically about cross-border e-commerce. And what that means is that what we previously spoke about is what we call domestic e-commerce, meaning that you as an international brand or a reseller has already established a subsidiary in China, and you have to import the products and so on and so forth. Cross-border relates to the fact that, in fact, any Western, Asian, African, South American brand can open up a store on the cross-border marketplaces like Tmall Global, JD Worldwide, Kaola, Little Red Book, and you can then sell the international version of your product straight to a Chinese consumer. You don't need to import the product, you don't need the local certificates and pay tariffs or duties, but you can leverage these marketplaces to sell really straight to the consumer. And usually that is particularly suitable for brands where there is a high engagement by the consumer in terms of safety, or secondly, when it comes to products that are not in that form or model available in China, so exclusivity. In the case of safety, one of the top categories is infant formula, baby milk powder, where Chinese moms have a very high concern of locally produced products, be it foreign brands or Chinese brands, to potentially be tainted. So they will, if they are middle class, upper middle class, will always prefer the foreign packaged and filled product, just because it's such a high engagement, such an important category. And like that, the same applies to many other categories that are typically small, high value, not too heavy. Obviously, you cannot sell pianos or Turkish stone cross-border, but anything that is being able to be shipped directly or through a free trade zone bonded warehouse. So what I want to do now is go right into a Q&A with our panelists, so that they can share their best practices from a marketplace perspective, brand perspective, and service operator perspective. And please allow me to first speak with Catherine, who we mentioned previously, worked many years, I believe it was 20 years, with the German infant formula HIP. That is number 4 or 5 in the German market. Anybody who's German will very dearly know this brand and love it. So Catherine, can you walk us through your experience on setting up and then running cross-border e-commerce specifically for your brand and your category? What were the challenges? What were the learnings? What do you advise others are the key success factors?
Thanks for the intro, George. So I think HIP came to the cross-border business in China, firstly, a little bit by accident. We already were doing business on the domestic side. So we had a product which was already registered fully for China domestic business with an own recipe, with an own package. And parallel to that, we had huge amounts of product which were being pulled out of the German market and brought over by any kind of business person or any kind of tourist, and also were being sent over as a kind of Haitao Daigo business model. And the whole thing in the beginning was a real mess, and actually still is, but at that time in 2012, 2013, products were being pulled out of Germany to such an extent that there was a shortage in Germany. It wasn't so bad in Austria, but in Germany there were signs on all of the shelves saying you can only buy maximum of 2 products. And friends of mine who live in Germany and Austria who are, let's say, Asian origin, they were even asked to show birth certificates of kids if they went into stores to buy product. And so this was the point where we started to look as to how we can officially bring all of this traffic together. And this was, for us, a real challenge. And I think that a lot of brands underestimate the challenge of doing this in China. They underestimate what extent of choice that consumers have in China, and they go into this kind of cross-border business without a real strategy, or they just think it's great, I have some kind of spot business. And they don't really realize that if they want to build that in a healthy way, that they have to actually take control of that. They have to grab all of that traffic and they have to bring it under their own control, because otherwise they will have a complete mess on the market. They have to take care of the pricing, they have to take care of the messaging, and they have to make sure that from a customer service point of view, that consumers who have questions are actually being given the right answers. I remember in this time, I talked with one guy who was buying products directly in Germany, I think at the time. And he said to me, you know, when mums ask me about this question, how do you answer this? And I gave him an answer. And I said to him, well, how do you normally answer this? And he told me something that was just, it was just complete crap. And I was like completely shocked that he was just inventing something because he had no idea about the product. And so he just was telling them that the other products in the market added some dangerous substances in order to solve this issue of solubility, and that his product directly from Germany was the only one that solved this particular problem that mums sometimes have with digestion of their kids and so on. So yeah, it's a very interesting topic, very challenging.
Any other of the panelists want to chime in on experiences and challenges, but also key success factors that you believe are important for medium-sized, family-owned, smaller-sized brands to know, to understand they have the opportunity to sell directly to Chinese consumers, but what they really need to look out for if they want to be successful in the long term?
So I think, one thing, Catherine, long time. How are you? That's first. I think Catherine's story is very unique because one thing she didn't mention is that HIPP in China, HIP in China, is very big. And she built a very big business using distribution in the market in a formal way. And then the channel conflict that was created off of Chinese consumers, almost a social sort of escalation of a rumor, could happen to any brand. And it's something for, I think brands that are selling products that are consumable have to worry about. And that is that, it is a very competitive world in China, and there are a lot of people that are quite clever and will find ways to sort of capture the flag if you're not paying attention. So I think one of the things is going back to, and I'm sure, Fabian's no longer on the call, but one thing is to really, before you launch, to own your path to purchase. Even if you don't have intention of actually opening up an entity in China eventually, you still need to own your actual Chinese trademarks and the trademarks on your brand in both Chinese and English, how Chinese consumers know you, talk about you in those characters. You need to own that. And you need to do that before you start commerce or even before you start promotion and activation. Because if you don't do that, it's very hard to unravel. And a second thing would be to not give authorization to just anyone. And I think this is where you have to lean on Alibaba's management, their category managers, on reputation of people you know in your circle, and really educate yourself on partner selection. One of the biggest problems we deal with, and I'm sure George can talk about this as well, is dealing with takebacks. It's, we do 3 of these a year, and they're always painful. And it's usually the brand will choose a partner because of expediency, and they sign away their life, their rights to the future. And it's very hard to get it back. It's really hard. It's even hard to buy it back. So that would be my first thing, is your pre-commerce is to really think about, before you make this commitment and before you go through the process of learning about and engaging with Chinese consumers at scale, is understanding what you need to own behind it, so that later, when you do come into the country or you open up your global store and later you want to build a domestic presence like Catherine had, that you actually own all the infrastructure that gives you the rights to your commerce and your brand. So I think that would be one big point. Actually, I'll stop there for now.
Sharon, do you want to give the viewpoint of Alibaba? I know that you currently in your role work on outbound, but in your previous job as a category manager, do you want to comment on what you think are the key success factors specifically for cross-border e-commerce, and also what you would advise, how big does a brand need to be that engaging in direct-to-consumer makes actual sense?
Okay, sure. Honestly, in my mind, cross-border or domestic doesn't have too much of a difference, because the end customer didn't really change. The end customer is someone in China who will be targeted by both sets of ads. So whether that's somebody from a foreign brand or whether that's a brand that's domestic to them, as long as the foreign brand is adequately translated, their story is adequately told, their brand is somewhat differentiated. At the end of the day, you're targeting the same person. So in terms of a level playing field, I think foreign brands and domestic brands have both their pluses and minuses when they're selling to the same end customer. But for obviously, if you're a foreign brand and you're outside of China at the moment, your plus is that you have the place of origin card on you. And in Tmall, we call that 溯源 in Chinese. It means traceability. So in China, for instance, when we're buying any product, it's always interesting to know where this product is actually made. Of course, there are a lot of stories where something that's made in China, it might be questionable as to what factory is producing it. Whereas if it's produced elsewhere, there is a bit more trust, maybe. That is an extremely, extremely arguable topic. It is still existing. What's still existing is that consumer notion that, for instance, if it was baby powder, that if it was produced in the green, sustainable farms of New Zealand, where these cows are roaming free and grazing on New Zealand grass, that supposedly the milk that they're producing is healthier and more nutritious and whatnot. That's
I'm getting hungry just after that.
I hope you're drinking milk or consuming something as we speak, because we could be going for a while into dinner time. So that is definitely a story that a lot of brands have told. I think that's the card that a lot of foreign brands have. So when you're looking at the Chinese market, definitely keep that in mind, because also from a differentiation perspective, it's different, right? When you're buying a product that's locally made, you're competing with all of the other domestic brands. Whereas when you're from almost like a land far, far away, or something because of how you made the product, or it's artisanal, or it took many, many years to craft something, or there's a special way that you produce these products, all of those are selling points, and all of those should be emphasized when you're building your brand story and you're opening that store. So usually where you execute that piece is when you're opening your store and decorating your first page where you're showcasing to your consumer who I am as a brand, what values I'm representing, what type of photos, what emotions do those photos evoke, things like that. Tell the story from the get-go for a brand that has never emerged in a Chinese consumer's eyes or landscape. So those would be the things that I would consider.
Thanks, Sharon.
Many others.
We're going to open up questions now to the audience, and Ashley is going to give a quick overview of how we do that. Before that, I want to give one last advice, which is kind of my biggest learning of working with brands over the years, and that is please take a long-term approach and a long-term perspective to China. If you want to sell and market cross-border or domestically, nothing happens overnight except for the Chinese speed of technology. But you as a brand really need to take a long-term approach. You cannot expect to make sales from day one. You can possibly expect to be profitable in year one, but you will need to invest. So please take the time to prepare for that, also in terms of the financial muscle that you will have to sustain in the market. Eventually, you will be successful. China is not only the largest e-commerce market, but actually the largest retail market in the world that it became last year. So as long as you have the patience and also the arguably, of course, the financial means, please take a long-term approach, and eventually it will definitely work out, but don't expect overnight success.
Beautiful points, Sharon and George. So stamina is important. Your story and the place of origin are definitely the 3 points that will get you closer to success in the China market than anything else. With this, I would like to reset this section very quickly. So as mentioned, we have just now opened our room to questions. So you can essentially raise your hands right now. Please make sure that when you raise your hand, you've already done the following. You have gone onto your profile, and just hearing us speak, you can click on your icon, go into your bio, edit it, and the first question, the first line of your bio will be either the question, so you write the word question if you have a question, and in a few words summarize what the question is, or if you would like to contribute to the discussion, you write contribution, and also a few words to mention what you want to contribute about. While you guys are editing your bios, and the moment you edited them, raising your hands, I would like to invite you for our upcoming events. We have a big community of China watchers, and we have ongoing events about China, bringing China to the world, sharing positive stories, business stories about China and the world. And I invite you to join them. For instance, tomorrow we have a phenomenal China speed dating, special Valentine's Day edition starting at 8 p.m. China time. Do join. It's going to be a phenomenal lineup of speakers, fun, conversational, interesting, phenomenal insights. Then on the 15th, on Monday, we have Digital China Q&A on marketing and e-commerce at 9 p.m. China time. Then we have on the 18th of February, which is Thursday next week, Latin America, Brazil, and China Opportunity Series. So expanding into China. Do join this conversation as well. On the 23rd, which is Tuesday, the week after, we're talking about investing in China. Conversation with Kevin Liu and Peggy Liu, our phenomenal moderator for today, Peggy. Then we have China hip hop trends. Later, that is on the 25th of February. 6th and 7th of March, we also have MIT Asia Business Conferences on Xiaomi, sustainability, and more. I do invite you to add Peggy at Shanghai Peggy on WeChat, one word, Shanghai Peggy on WeChat, and she will be able to add you onto the appropriate WeChat group. And in that WeChat group, depending on your interest, is it Latin America plus China? Is it hip-hop trends in China? Is it the China speed, etc.? She will be able to add you onto a relevant WeChat group where you can network, talk, and also get notifications about our upcoming events. With this, we already see a couple of hands are up. Let's get down to business. George, back to you.
Yep. Okay. Anyone who has questions about doing China, new retail in China, please raise your hand. If you can, please update your bio. the first word and quickly write what you would like to ask, and then we can invite you on stage. Let's start with, let me see who we have. Let's start with Zuber. Please come on stage and accept my invitation. There you are. Please, the stage is yours. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, thanks. Hi, Zuber. Hey, Arnold. I wasn't expecting to be the first person to ask a question, but here we go. I work in commerce abroad. I've lived in China for over 6 years before. I'm still in Asia, but I do have a question that I don't have any visibility on in China. And I've been following you, Josh, a lot on LinkedIn. So lots of great content, but I haven't heard too much about how specifically like around D2C and platforms like Shopify, are they trending in China, or is it still, a little bit different for SMBs? Like, how are they utilizing technology to distribute either locally or internationally?
I'll jump in. Is your question around whether you can use existing overseas infrastructure in China? Is that your question? Like Shopify or whatever you're using?
Yeah, I understand. Like, there's social commerce is a really big trend in China, but I'm curious to direct to consumer, like web and mobile, like building your own brand on your own website and platforms. Like, is there a Shopify of China? And is Shopify itself trending? I know Shopify opened up Hong Kong. So curious about how that type of platform, that type of category is trending or not in China.
Gotcha.
Yeah, George, you want to jump in on this one?
No, go ahead, Josh. You go first.
Yeah, what I would say is that, whenever we've tried any kind of standalone commercial approach, the best kind of analogy I can give, it's like creating a pond in your backyard that you plan to make into a fishing pond, right? The issue is when you do that, you got to stock it with fish because there's no fish that are actually in your pond, right? And it's the same with sort of Wechat commerce and a lot of other platforms other than the big marketplaces. You have to look at like where the traffic is, yeah, where the fish are biting. And to me, it's not that it's impossible. So very large brands like Nike have exceptionally good direct-to-consumer commerce through their own standalone presence. I also have a client outside of China who operates cross-border from using their Shopify store in LA and doing quite a decent business, sort of trading around the marketplaces in China and not, going wide and shallow versus long, deep. Yeah. But that's the exception that proves the rule. And that is that the amount of sort of scale you need as a brand and in terms of your engagement with consumers, you need consumption at scale to be able to stock your pond. Does that make sense? So it's almost like regular commercial infrastructure is more like, a fishing pond that you stock. And if you don't have the fish, you don't catch anything. So this is pretty much my experience with it. And a lot of our clients, we do set up standalone or they have something going on. It depends on what it is, but it never really generates or takes off because, maybe it's also the brands we run are a bit smaller, more like small, mid-sized. Make sense?
Got it. Yes, it does.
All right. JT, did you have a question? Please go ahead and don't forget to unmute your mic and the stage is yours.
Actually, I was going to offer one little tidbit of tips for people trying to enter the Chinese markets. That is the chambers of commerce in China from your respective countries. I worked quite extensively with the European Chamber of Commerce and American Chamber of Commerce, and the smaller ones are the French, German chambers of commerce. They actually they should be your first stop if you want to physically go into China and to promote your products, because they actually provide a lot of help and they actually have a lot of local contacts and very useful tidbits and useful events and most of them are free. So if you want to physically go into China, I suggest you can drop in by your embassy and then find out what's going on in the local in your in the in your country's Chamber of Commerce in Beijing or Shanghai or Guangzhou. That's something really, really helpful, I think. And to come back to the previous gentleman's question, there isn't really Shopify in China, but there is more than just Wechat. There's actually a lot of platforms these days are getting a lot of attention from the overseas sellers in China. So there's very big communities. So one thing you can do is actually connect up with your community, your German community and American communities in Shanghai and Beijing on like internations and different Facebook groups, and they actually have a lot of activities and contacts as well. And a lot of these groups are on not just WeChat, but also on Kuaishou, Douyin. Well, actually, Alibaba's Taobao streaming. A lot of I've seen a lot of Western and non-Chinese sellers on these platforms. They're doing really well, actually.
Thank you, JT. And I think that is, that's actually a very good comment. And I can just give some examples from our side that support what you said, and that is that on a government level, we in the past, or right now actually, have worked with many government organizations from various countries that do exactly that. So we have worked with the Austrian government, me, myself being Austrian, and so that was established through them, but also with the Brazilian government, with the Lithuanian government. We worked with the ATO, the American Trade Organization. And what these government bodies usually do is they in many cases team up with their national post provider of that respective country, and then jointly make funds available that put money into research and business development planning on how the brands from their respective country can sell to Chinese consumers through cross-border e-commerce. So I think that's a very good tip, and I know there's a lot of money going to this by the EU and by individual countries around the world to help their brands. So definitely look out for that. Because you will get export grants, you will get free advice, and potentially your government or your postal organization will contract a consultant or a TP company who will prepare the entire business case for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you get connections because your Chamber of Commerce usually can connect you with the local industry Chamber of Commerce. Like, for example, if you sell a home decor or furniture or food, so your Chamber of Commerce can actually connect you with the furniture Chamber of Commerce or association in Shanghai or in Beijing. So yeah, they can open many doors for you.
Yep. Yeah. So speaking of countries and country branding, sorry, Josh, I just wanted to also invite Fabien. I saw he's from France. Welcome. And you had a question specifically on wine, and then let's have Josh answer to that or expand to what JT said. Fabien, you go ahead first, please.
Hi, thank you very much, everyone. I think it's a very insightful topic you are having here. As you saw, I'm based in France. I'm working a lot around wine. And my question what are the latest wine trends in China? Because for a lot of European countries, it's very hard to understand. So is it more Chinese wines, more French wines, more Italian wines? And what would you recommend to wine producers, mainly European ones, who want to succeed online, like on Alibaba or Tmall?
Josh and Sharon, you two guys want to go?
Yeah, I don't currently run any wine brands, so I wouldn't be the right person to answer that. I do have beverage. We do beer for Belgium. We run Duvel Group, and it's been a very successful sort of entry into e-commerce. But also, they're very well established in the market, and they've had 8 years on the ground. They have 10,000 points of sale, so it's a little bit different, and it's a domestic market. What I can say about wine specifically is that certain regions, have the origin story, as Sharon mentioned earlier, that really makes a big difference. So, for example, Burgundy is super, super popular, right, in China. And even, very wealthy Chinese are actually buying their own wineries in France. So I think some of that, because wine is such a big and complex market, I think, more research would need to be done. And I don't currently have, that kind of insight because I'm not currently operating in that space. But I guess you could reach out to pretty much anyone on this panel and, we can all pull some data for you to give you an idea of where things are moving. But currently, I don't have any direct insight.
Sharon, are you there? Do you want to comment anything from your experience in the food category on the category manager side?
Yeah. So wine is first of all, alcohol as a category in specifically to food is probably the fastest growing food category that we have. It's one where the consumer segment has a dramatic change because alcohol, unlike Western consumer habits, is a hugely male-dominated space. So in China, if you were to look at the data of the people who are actually purchasing, whether it's wine, whether it's the baijiu, which is, I think it's a 50% level alcohol spirit that's produced locally in China, whether it's the whiskeys or cognacs or the liquors, it's predominantly purchased by male. So I would say if you are a new brand looking at China and you're in the wine category, look towards targeting women and making that a very interesting and special purchase experience for the women category for the women consumer segment. Because in terms of wine and spirits, from a consumer data point of view, the women consumer segment is a very fast growing consumer in this space. So there's a lot of also new DTC brands and new. They're very startup-y looking. It's a very visual game, so I'd literally have to pull out their brand and show you for you to truly consume the message. And the difficult part about this is it's also hard to search. So, if you do need any advice in this type of space, let me know. But I think it's a category with a lot of potential.
So,
absolutely.
If I may give you some insights in terms of this category, because I did work a little bit in it, and for some actually small and large brands which we're trying to do the market, I will give you some key insights. So first of all, it is still quite an immature, I would say, industry in terms of the consumers' knowledge and kind of like habits around the wine itself. Even though China, I think back in 2018 or 19, it became the biggest red wine drinker market in the world. It's still an immature market when it comes to the limited knowledge people have of it. Currently, apparently, approximately 88% of all consumptions in terms of wine are still red. And then the second, around 10%, you'll have white and then rosé. Around 75% of the consumption actually of the wine drinking is still done at home. But people are learning about wine with obviously some of those new format of restaurants, taking place or actually coming online in Beijing, Shanghai, or Guangzhou. And the whole gastronomy experience is something that people are starting to understand and enjoy in terms of the wine. And like someone just mentioned, in terms of the segments, definitely the women's segment is the one that you want to take a look at in terms of the ability to have a fast growth, because women are the ones who more than enough actually are choosing other drinking occasions. So, for example, when they're dining with their friends, offering a nice bottle of wine has a bit of a chic kind of like gift to give among girlfriends in Shanghai particularly. So there's a few little things that we can probably provide to you in terms of insights when it comes to the wine market in the country, as well as the pricing and the platforms. The influence market when it comes to the wine also is really, really well. Is doing extremely well. So yeah, there are a few things that you can definitely learn.
Thanks, Sam. Fabienne, it's nearing the end of our session at 7 o'clock China time, and it's a Saturday night. So I promise you, once I'm done with this panel, I'm going to have a glass of French wine.
Thank you very much, everyone. Much appreciated.
In fact, if you're looking to enter the Chinese market, I can give you one tip. Which is in every large city in China, there is usually a import tax-free zone. There are usually very large wine and food, like foreign gourmet wine and food importers in these tax-free zones. So I think that's one place you can start, just contacting these importers, large importers in each city in their tax-free zones.
Thanks, JT. We have two more people on stage that came from the audience and would like to ask a question. I want to make sure we can still cover that in the next 12 minutes. And I also invited Kennedy on stage, who is an old friend who used to be the CEO Greater China of GNC, the supplements company, and who has a very rich hands-on experience with both cross-border and domestic e-commerce in that particular category for health supplements. But maybe let's first have Jamie ask her question, and then let's see who wants to chime in, and maybe also have Kennedy share some of his experience.
Thanks for bringing me up to the stage, and I've been listening to this for a couple hours now. Super great insights from the board members, and really thanks to the host. So I have about 5-year background in e-commerce as a business finance partner, and I have a question to the panelists. Curious to see what's your perspectives on some of the foreign cross-border retail platforms, such as maybe Amazon Global Store, and how they compare to Alibaba for the sellers abroad. Thank you.
To clarify, are you asking of a general comparison? How is, say, Tmall Global or Tmall different than Amazon, or specifically for selling to Chinese consumers, if international marketplaces like Amazon are suitable to also tap into the China market?
It's more of the later one.
Okay.
Yeah. Because recently Amazon's retail business just pulled out from China. Seems like they've been experiencing great amount of pressure from the local competitors. However, they are keeping their global store business there, and from the data that I've seen, it's been growing quite well. But as all of you previously mentioned, that in China this is a very special market, and Alibaba and also other domestic e-commerce platforms have huge advantage in terms of branding, marketing, operation. So curious to learn what's your view on how the foreign competitors can compete with the locals.
Yeah. Very briefly to kind of set the stage for other people to chime in. When it comes to cross-border e-commerce, once more, it's really Alibaba that dominates. Tmall Global is the largest cross-border marketplace, has around 35% market share. And Kaola has around 25-27% market share. And then Little Red Book has around 3% market share. All of those three are nowadays owned by Alibaba. So that in summary alone, that takes you to around 65-70% of all of the cross-border GMV being in some way, shape or form controlled by Alibaba. And then you have secondary players like JD Worldwide or VIP.com. And unfortunately, to your question about Amazon, their market share or their capabilities are really, really small. And also in our experience, working with brands that previously were on Amazon, it's extremely small. And, the main takeaway of China is you really need to localize, both in terms of the communication strategy, that you cannot use Google and Facebook and Twitter, but need to use the local platforms. And the same applies also to Chinese. So I really don't believe that after having observed Amazon for such a long time in the market that they will ever be able to recover again. And I also don't think that any other foreign player could really break into it. Rakuten tried with an alliance with Baidu. That didn't work out. The closest is really Shopify, which was invested by Alibaba to some extent, and kind of integrating Shopify, which we, by the way, do. We've built an API between for Wechat mini programs and Tmall Global, so you can sell out of your Shopify store to China. But that is, really, again, through a Chinese platform partner. So direct to consumer on a foreign marketplace, I don't see any of them being able to compete in the near future or in the long term.
I agree with George completely on this. And I would add one thing that JC mentioned. If you are considering, investing in outside of the Alibaba ecosystem, you would be, hard pressed to spend any time with Amazon, and you would spend all your time with Douyin, Kuaishou, with Bili, with, as many social interactions as you can, because most of those channels are fast growing and really promising, whereas Amazon is sort of a dead channel from what, my experience as well.
Pablo, did you have a question? You're the last person to go, so please, the stage is yours, and we're going to wrap up in around 5, 6, 7 minutes, and then go into our last session tonight. Pablo, are you there?
Pablo's here for the next session. Yeah. He's our speaker for the next session.
Oh, I am sorry.
Yay!
My
bad, George. Sorry about that.
No worries. Well then, Kennedy, did you want to very briefly give us your top 3 tips, success factors, learnings of doing business in China, cross-border in the supplements category for many, many years?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, George. Appreciate the kind introduction and for inviting me up. I was planning on just listening in, but appreciate the push. So I'm happy to be here, everyone. Wish I could have heard more. I'm in Dublin right now, so I was asleep for much of this, but was glad to wake up and be able to catch some of this. So yeah, my name's Kennedy. I used to run GNC, U.S. supplements company in China for a few years, and then now I'm sitting here in Europe and leading growth in Europe for the same company. So for supplements in China, like George said, I've done cross-border and domestic. I mean, for us, for me, like approaching the market, I mean, blessed to be in a category with a huge wave, right? This is true worldwide, certainly in mainland China for the past 6 years. Just a huge momentum behind the category. So there's growth there. And so what I've tried to always stay kind of very much focused on that and just go to where the waves are. So go to where the growth is. And so that means lots of category research, research into sales channels and whatnot, and just making sure that I'm not trying to create anything new. I'm just trying to serve customers where they already are. And that may sound obvious and not obvious, but I think it's somewhat subtle. I think oftentimes we can get a bit ambitious in trying to create new customer journeys for our products or for our brands when oftentimes what we need to do is just be very mindful of where people are right now and just go to them. I don't know what been listening for maybe 20 minutes now. Agree with what has been said in terms of channel focus and whatnot. It's always been important to me to find good partners. And so when I'm thinking about, you can have a channel strategy, you can have a category strategy, whatever, but it's always been critical to find good folks to execute. And that is made or broken strategies or tactics that I've set out before. And so what has been important to me as a foreign brand operating in the mainland is always be very, very clear on what I'm good at, what my team can be good at, what me representing a foreign brand can be good at, and what I'm not, and those things that I'm not to outsource. And I think it generally falls along these lines. as a foreign brand, you bring in products in. I have product, right? I've got the product. No one can really take that from me. Making that in a factory, in a plant, in a co-man plant. But I have the product and I have the brand. But much, basically everything else. I'm not an expert in and can't really bring anything else to the table. And so it's really critical when I think about marketing or sales strategies, or any sort of support functions that I'm looking for local partners to help me set those things up and to help me operate those. I think, as I just sit here today, it's kind of what is what popped to mind as I was listening to you guys. I think about sort of my approach and what I think is helpful. If anybody questions, I'm not sure how much time we have left in this section, but always happy to take any questions. So
thanks, Kennedy.
Back to you.
Yep. All right. Well, we have around, let's do 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then we're going to close this whole section. If any of the panelists want to, maybe each of the panelists, if you want to give some closing words, either on what you've observed in the past, best practices and success factors, or what you believe are the biggest trends this year and in the coming years that you observe are emerging in the Chinese market, specifically for e-commerce.
Maybe I can start off with that then before the others jump in. I would just say it's not so much a prediction for 2021, but I think it's good advice for brands. A lot of brands underestimate, like has been mentioned several times during this session, the importance of listening to what you're told by various partners, be it Chamber of Commerce, be it Alibaba, category managers, be it your TP, and they underestimate the fact that they need to put resources into China, not just money, but they need to put personnel on the brand side into this, and they need to adapt their content for the Chinese market. They don't have to change the story or reinvent the wheel, but they do have to provide a huge amount of content. And I think a lot of brands think that they can just go in and just translate what they already have, and that really doesn't work. So they have to adapt what their brand story is and their brand core. They have to really adapt that for the Chinese market and make sure that they have enough content, enough levels of customer service, and that they can make decisions fast enough during promotional periods in order to really have a good impact on the market and generate great sales.
Yeah, great point, Catherine. And I want to encourage anybody in the audience who is so far not experienced with China, just go to Taobao or Tmall, and you can just type in an English keyword. You're going to find something, and then click on the product page and just observe how rich in content products are displayed. And, in the Western world, when you talk about e-commerce, the e-commerce manager or brand marketing person usually thinks of, we're going to upload one product picture and we're going to have 5 bullet points with the key selling points, and that's how we sell on Amazon. Well, if you look at a typical Chinese e-commerce website, you will have at least 5 product shots on top, then up to 20 visuals down when you scroll down with models, product usage, benefits, packaging. You will most likely have a video specifically to that SKU on the page, and on top you'll have a live stream person probably on the flagship store giving you live answers. So there's really a huge difference and such a big, like Catherine said, commitment needed to also invest into authentic content to really market and sell the brands. And sorry for interrupting. Let's have the other panelists give their either best practices or prediction or hottest trends that they observe for this year and the coming years.
All right, I'll jump in real quick. I just wanted to say, George, Ashley, Nishtha, Arnold, and Peggy, everyone who's put this together, I think this is fantastic. You guys have done a marathon job, and the effort does not go unnoticed, and I think it's amazing. And I think the value that's being delivered here is exceptional. And my only comment would be, because everyone's given such good insights into what's happening in real time in China and what might happen, is that China takes a village. It's not one person or one thing. And just sitting on a panel like this with so many exceptional individuals with so much deep knowledge and experience in the market, it's obvious to me in an ecosystem this complex that you need to study, you need to be open-minded and humble, you need to learn, you need to be fully committed, and you need to work with people that understand what's going to happen and can help you drive success in this market. And that's all I would say. And I think you could do worse than the people sitting around you here on this Clubhouse session. And thank you, guys. I wanted to express my gratitude. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. Sharon, what is the hottest trend for this year? Tell us from the inside secrets at Alibaba. What are we going to see this year that's absolutely mind-blowing?
Sustainability, which is what I said earlier. I think that's going to be a very hot topic for the platform and all the brands and all of the consumers that we're targeting also. It's a topic that everyone is having their eyes on.
And with that, I want to hand back to Ashley, and we're closing this session on China e-commerce. I hope it was useful for the audience, interesting, and I'm excited to go into the next session, which is about luxury, while I will be sipping, as mentioned, on a glass of luxurious French wine on my Turkish stone bottom floor. So thank you, everybody, for the inputs, for the education, for the experience sharing. And over to you, Ashley.